The drive to achieve one's goals at any cost can lead people to commit shocking acts and betrayals. It can be hard to grasp the lengths someone will go to achieve their dreams, especially when it endangers the lives of others. Today's story is about a tragic murder that shocked all of Brazil. The impact was felt most deeply in the small town of São João Batista. For this close-knit community, the crime is one of the most brutal and unprecedented events in history. Flávia Godinho Mafra was born on April 19, 1996, in São João Batista, a peaceful town in the southern Brazilian state of Santa Catarina, grew up in Canalinha. As the youngest child in a large, loving family, her parents worked hard to support their children. Flávia was kind, friendly, and outgoing. She excelled in her studies and had a passion for music, always surrounded by friends. From a young age, she dreamed of becoming a teacher and had no plans to leave her hometown. After attending a local teacher training college, she graduated and began teaching at the elementary school she had once attended. At 20, Flávia met Valdeli Mafra. They quickly fell in love and started dating. In the summer of 2019, Valdeli proposed, and Flávia happily accepted. They got married that October, and just 2 months later, they received wonderful news: they were going to have a baby. Their joy was beyond words. In another development, Rosalba Maria Grime was born in 1994 in Canalinha, a town in Santa Catarina. There is little information available about her early life or family background. From a young age, she was seen as unusual. People often felt she exaggerated stories, fabricated achievements, and sought to appear more important, making it hard for them to take her seriously. As she grew older, Rosalba increasingly craved attention by playing on others' sympathy. She would create tales of personal struggles and serious health issues she claimed to be facing. In one troubling incident, she tried to prevent a boyfriend from leaving by telling him she had a terminal illness, begging for his companionship during what she described as her final months. When her deception continued for a long time, she suddenly claimed to have made a miraculous recovery. In 2017, Rosalba married Zolmir Schistel, a quiet, shy man who was easygoing and agreeable. Rosalba had taken the initiative to propose the marriage, and Zolmir simply nodded in agreement. They moved into a small home in a peaceful residential area on the outskirts of town. Rosalba worked as a librarian at a local school. However, her co-workers had mixed feelings about her, primarily because of her dominant demeanor and reputation for being dishonest. For the first 3 years of their marriage, Rosalba struggled to conceive, with doctors suggesting that she might never be able to have children. Therefore, when she discovered in the fall of 2019 that she was pregnant, she was filled with joy. She quickly shared the exciting news with her family, friends, and co-workers. Overcome with happiness, Rosalba even posted a picture of her positive pregnancy test on social media, announcing it to everyone she knew. In the weeks that followed, she was inundated with congratulations for her and the baby. Her husband and family treated her like a queen, shielding her from stress, taking care of everything for her. Even co-workers who had not been particularly friendly with her before began to show kindness, recognizing how long she had hoped to be a mother. In December of that year, Rosalba faced a heartbreaking event. She suffered a miscarriage in her 3rd month of pregnancy, leaving her deeply shocked and silent about her loss. Instead of sharing her pain, she chose to act as if she were still pregnant. She seemed determined to maintain the facade, perhaps knowing she might not have another chance to conceive. To support her ruse, she started wearing loose clothing and eating more to create the appearance of being pregnant. Meanwhile, a troubling plan began to emerge in her mind. About 2 months after she lost the baby, news spread at the school about the pregnancy of a young teacher named Flávia, who received many congratulations. Until that point, Rosalba and Flávia were not close. They had rarely interacted. However, Rosalba shared several fabricated stories in order to gain sympathy. She added Flávia on social media and began messaging her every day, suggesting they go for walks or chat since their due dates were similar. Rosalba asserted that they would have much in common. Flávia was initially hesitant to have lunch with Rosalba because of her eccentric reputation, but she eventually agreed during a work break. They exchanged phone numbers, and Rosalba shared several fabricated stories to gain sympathy. The only true part of her stories was that she had struggled for years to conceive and had longed for this pregnancy. Of course, she did not mention the miscarriage. Initially, they met infrequently, despite seeing each other at work almost every day. It later emerged that Rosalba had also connected with two other expectant mothers from the same town on social media, who she believed were at a similar stage in their pregnancies. She attempted to build friendships with them by inviting them out and asking to visit their homes. Rosalba claimed she was having a daughter. However, when she discovered that both women she had met online were having boys, she abruptly cut off contact with them. Shortly after, she found out that Flávia was expecting a girl, and from that point on, Rosalba became completely fixated on her. As time went on, it became harder for Rosalba to keep up the pretense of being pregnant. She frequently searched online for symptoms and experiences that expectant mothers often report. She would share these with her husband, family, and co-workers as if they were her own. Over several months, she gained nearly 30 pounds, but her appearance still didn't fully resemble that of someone in the later stages of pregnancy. Her husband insisted on joining her for doctor's appointments. He wanted to see the baby on the ultrasound, but Rosalba had to come up with excuses to maintain the deception. Zomir was a trusting man who loved his wife and believed everything she said, which made it easier for her to keep him unaware of the truth. She would tell him that appointments had been cancelled or rescheduled due to the clinic being overbooked or the doctor being unavailable. At times, she claimed she was lucky enough to get a last-minute appointment while he was at work, and he believed her every time. To strengthen her story, Rosalba began creating fake notes on her phone that appeared to be from her doctor, including recommendations, appointment confirmations, and cancellations. Although she didn't have a strong grasp of medical terminology, often made spelling and factual errors, Zomir wasn't familiar with medical details, so he had no reason to question her. To maintain the deception and avoid raising suspicion, Rosalba even sent messages to her husband pretending to be the doctor. In one message, she suggested that they temporarily pause their intimate relationship to minimize any risks to the pregnancy. He accepted this advice, believing it was from a medical expert. Rosalba developed an obsession with shopping for baby items such as onesies, diapers, bottles, pacifiers, blankets, and toys. She frequently visited stores with her husband, mother, or sister, but eventually, all her attention turned to Flávia. In July 2020, Rosalba organized an emotional maternity photo shoot. In the photos, she wore a flowing pregnancy gown and held tiny baby booties and a onesie while her husband lovingly embraced and kissed her belly, while she smiled sweetly for the camera. Everything appeared so genuine that no one suspected anything amiss. Those photos would later become part of the criminal case files. By early June 2020, Flávia and Rosalba were almost inseparable, spending time together every day, sharing thoughts, and planning for the future. However, it was always Rosalba who took the initiative. Flávia, being kind and empathetic, found it hard to say no. Whenever she tried to reschedule, Rosalba would play on Flavia's sympathy, claiming she was going through personal issues, needed someone to talk to, which worked every time. Rosalba was closely watching Flávia, asking her about her symptoms, doctor visits, and medical tests. She would then share those details with her own family and husband as if they were her own experiences. Rosalba imitated Flavia's walk, mannerisms, food cravings, and even how she held her back or moved awkwardly. Valdelli disapproved of his wife's new friendship and was upset about the time they spent together, which created tension in their marriage. They argued about it several times, but Flávia, being gentle and compassionate, couldn't bring herself to reject or ignore Rosalba. By mid-July, Rosalba had told people that she was due to deliver her baby, but she concocted another lie, claiming that the doctors had incorrectly calculated her due date. Meanwhile, she was secretly planning something disturbing, a scenario so dreadful. In August, Rosalba started planning a surprise celebration for Flávia to honor Flavia's upcoming baby. She chose decorations, invited guests, and set up a special photo area. Flávia, wanting to be polite, initially tried to decline the party. However, Rosalba became emotional, claiming she had put in a lot of effort and truly wanted to give Flavia a meaningful experience. Eventually, Flavia reluctantly agreed, unaware of the twists ahead. The celebration was scheduled for August 27, 2020. Rosalba managed all the details, promised to send the location and final arrangements to the guests. However, the day before the event, Rosalba contacted each guest and claimed the celebration had to be postponed due to unexpected issues. She assured them she would provide a new date and time soon. Her explanation was convincing, and no one questioned it, nor did anyone reach out to Flavia, who remained completely in the dark. On August 27th, at the originally planned time, Rosalba picked up Flavia, telling her they were going to the baby shower. Because it was meant to be a women-only event, Flavia's husband, Valdelli, stayed home. He walked his heavily pregnant wife to Rosalba's car, completely unaware this would be the last time he saw her. As they drove, Flavia was oblivious to their destination. Rosalba said it was a surprise, and a few minutes into the drive, she suggested Flavia wear a blindfold to keep it a secret. Flavia hesitated but eventually agreed, not sensing any danger. During the drive, Rosalba kept the conversation light to help Flavia feel relaxed and avoid raising any suspicions. They went to an abandoned ceramics warehouse in Canalinha's Galera neighborhood. After helping Flavia out of the car while she was still blindfolded, Rosalba guided her into one of the old buildings. The silence and strange smell likely made Flavia uneasy. When she reached up to take off the blindfold, Rosalba suddenly struck her head with a heavy brick. Rosalba hit she multiple times until she collapsed on the floor. In a final act of violence, Rosalba punched her in the face. It seemed Rosalba had wanted to hurt her as much as possible, despite once calling her a friend. Without checking if Flavia was still alive, Rosalba hurried to carry out the next phase of her horrific plan. She had brought a box cutter, some rags, and a blanket to the scene. With a steady hand, she began to cut into her friend, Flavia. Rosalba had no medical training, no understanding of anatomy, and no idea how a C-section was performed. Despite this, she started slicing into Flavia's abdomen with the box cutter, trying to retrieve the baby. She acted aggressively, using too much force and lacking precision. The box cutter, unlike a surgical instrument, tore through the skin rather than creating clean cuts. Rosalba had completely misunderstood the reality of what she was attempting. What she thought would be a quick procedure turned out to be chaotic and messy. The process took much longer than she expected, and her frustration grew, resulting in her accidentally cutting the baby several times while trying to pull her out. The environment was entirely unsanitary. Rosalba didn't even attempt to clean the tools she had brought. The fact that the baby survived the ordeal was nearly miraculous. After finally extracting the baby, she wrapped the newborn in the blanket and placed her in the back seat of her car. Rosalba then wiped her hands as best as she could, changed into clean clothes she had brought from home, and threw her blood-stained outfit into the trunk. She paused to rehearse her story before heading to the hospital. In her haste, Rosalba forgot to properly close the trunk of her car, and while waiting at a red light, it popped open enough to expose the bloodied clothing inside. Passengers in the car behind her noticed this and immediately called the police, providing a description of the vehicle and the direction it was heading. Minutes after Rosalba arrived at the hospital, officers intercepted her at the entrance as she carried a blood-soaked bundle in her arms. She told them it was her baby and that the newborn needed urgent medical attention. Officers escorted her to the emergency room while they waited nearby. With a trembling voice and tears in her eyes, Rosalba explained to the medical staff that she had gone into sudden labor and didn't have time to reach the hospital in advance. She said the baby had fallen onto gravel during her rush trip to the car, and in a panic, she had wrapped the baby in the first blanket she found before driving. When a doctor informed her that she needed to be examined, Rosalba refused, insisting she was fine. This raised immediate concerns among the staff. Upon examining the baby, the medical team found several unusual cuts and puncture wounds that did not appear to be from a fall on gravel. The injuries looked like they had been inflicted with a sharp object in a chaotic manner. Fortunately, none of the wounds affected vital organs, and the medical team quickly treated them to prevent infection. Concerns were immediately communicated to the police, who insisted that Rosalba undergo a physical examination. They warned her that if she refused, they would have to use legal authority. With no other option, Rosalba reluctantly agreed. The examination confirmed the doctor's suspicions. There were no signs of childbirth or pregnancy. There was no bleeding, no physical trauma, and no other indicators. Both internally and externally, everything looked normal, indicating that her entire account was fabricated. However, the doctors chose not to confront Rosalba immediately. Instead, they asked her to call her husband, Zolmir, and request that he bring her personal documents since she only had her driver's license with her. They needed to investigate where the baby had come from and the source of the unusual wounds on the newborn. The condition of the baby suggested a delivery in an unsanitary setting, but the full extent of the horrifying crime had yet to be uncovered. Rosalba called Zolmir, informing him that she was at the hospital and that their daughter had been born, but complications had arisen. She requested that he bring some paperwork and told him where to find it. Unfortunately, she made a major oversight. She forgot about a crucial piece of evidence. While gathering the documents, Zolmir inadvertently picked up a medical record that belonged to someone else, specifically Flavia's file. She had taken the folder to review the test results and recommendations and later hidden it in her drawer with her own documents. When hospital staff noticed that the medical file belonged to a woman named Flávia Godinho, who was expecting a daughter in early September, they realized the baby seemed to be hers but was not with her. However, the pressing question remained: where was the real mother? The police immediately began to suspect Zolmir could be involved. He was detained, questioned about how he had obtained someone else's medical file and where his wife had gotten the baby. Clearly confused and shaken, he claimed he had no idea what was happening. When informed that Rosalba had never been pregnant, he was visibly stunned. He then asserted that this was not true, stating he had cared for Rosalba throughout her pregnancy and even claimed to have felt the baby move. He presented photos from their maternity shoot and messages he believed were from the doctor monitoring her pregnancy. However, these messages turned out to be incriminating. They were filled with spelling errors and incorrect medical terminology. Authorities quickly discovered that the texts had come from Rosalba's own phone. After laying out all the facts, Zolmir broke down in tears, covering his face with his hands. He had truly trusted his wife and was eagerly anticipating becoming a father. Meanwhile, Flavia's husband, Valdelli, had reported her missing. He informed the police that she had left with a friend to attend the baby shower, expecting to return by 9 p.m., but she never came back and her phone was off. Worried, Valdelli began calling other guests who were said to be invited to the party, only to find out in shock that the event had been cancelled the day before. As Valdelli continued to attempt to reach Rosalba, the friend who supposedly organized the gathering, his concern deepened when he discovered her phone was also turned off. Realizing he couldn't wait any longer, he went directly to the police. However, law enforcement had not yet received the hospital report regarding Rosalba and the newborn, so they were unaware that the cases might be linked. The officers said they would start searching in the morning, but that wasn't sufficient for Valdelli. He teamed up with Flavia's parents and other relatives to begin their own search. They divided into teams to cover more areas, and Valdelli decided to check the outskirts of town. It was there, while passing by an abandoned factory, that he chose to stop and investigate. Tragically, he found his wife's body, brutally disfigured. Shocked and terrified, he quickly called the police, unable to understand what had happened or who could commit such a horrific act. When the police arrived, they had already been informed by the hospital about Rosalba. This woman also possessed a medical file belonging to a woman named Flávia Godinho. The authorities realized that the name of the victim discovered at an abandoned factory matched the name on the stolen medical file, which clarified the case. Forensic evidence showed that the victim had been hit at least 5 times in the head with a brick, but these injuries were not fatal on their own. The cause of death was identified as severe blood loss due to a violent attempt to remove the baby. A box cutter used in the act was found near the body. With all the evidence pointing to Rosalba's guilt, it became a straightforward case. DNA testing confirmed that the baby Rosalba attempted to claim was indeed Flavia's daughter. Despite the strong evidence against her, Rosalba continued to deny her involvement and maintained her story. Her fingerprints were discovered on the knife beside Flavia's body. Flavia's blood was found on her clothes, shoes, and hair. Investigators confirmed that Rosalba had a miscarriage months earlier and had lied about still being pregnant. She had premeditated the crime, choosing her victim in advance to take the baby, without considering the consequences of her actions. Rosalba was convicted of aggravated homicide, infanticide, concealment of a corpse, obstruction of justice, kidnapping of a minor, and denial of rights to infants. In hopes of receiving a lighter sentence, she later recounted the events in detail, shocking everyone in the courtroom. Her attorney claimed that Rosalba had suffered a psychological breakdown after her miscarriage and became obsessed with motherhood, losing touch with reality. However, a psychological evaluation determined that she was mentally competent and fully accountable for her actions. She was sentenced to 57 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving at least half of her sentence. Zolmir, Rosalba's husband, was completely exonerated. It was established that he had no knowledge of his wife's plans and had no part in the crime. Shortly after her arrest, he filed for divorce and moved away from São João Batista. Flavia's family also chose to leave the small town after the legal proceedings were finished. The case had become the most talked about topic in the community, and they wanted to protect young Cecilia, the name they chose for Flavia's daughter. The tragic murder of Flávia Godinho Mafra stands as a chilling reminder of how far desperation and obsession can drive a person to commit unspeakable acts. The small, tight-knit community of São João Batista was forever changed by this brutal crime, which shattered their sense of safety and trust. Flávia, a beloved teacher and soon-to-be mother, was robbed of her life and dreams by someone she considered a friend, leaving her family and community to grapple with unimaginable grief. Rosalba Maria Grimes' calculated deception and heinous actions not only took a life but also exposed the depths of her fixation on fulfilling a fantasy at any cost. While justice was served with her conviction, the scars left on Flavia's loved ones and the town will endure. Cecilia, Flavia's daughter, survives as a symbol of hope amidst tragedy, raised by a family determined to honor her mother's memory. This case underscores the profound consequences of unchecked ambition and the devastating ripple effects of betrayal, serving as a somber lesson in the value of empathy, honesty, and the sanctity of human life. The Missouri community believes that Christianity involves more than just having the right beliefs about God. They emphasize the importance of inner devotion, moral growth, and genuine repentance. They meet at home, hold educational gatherings. The Missouri are committed to following biblical principles, which include loving one's enemies and rejecting all forms of violence. This is the kind of environment Jeffrey David Borlase was raised in. In his youth, he got a summer job at the water park in Missouri. On his very first day at work, Jeffrey met a charming girl who, like him, wanted to earn a few dollars during the school holidays. Her name was Tanya May. Jeffrey was smitten. His heart told him that he had met the one with whom he would spend his whole life. Tanya was born on September 13, 1974. She was raised in a family where Christian values were paramount, patient, indulgent, and selfless. Tanya saw in Jeffrey her other half, a wonderful husband, and a loving father. Everything happened as they hoped. They got married. Inspired by love and hope, they created a strong family. Then, 4 children were born. True to their beliefs, Jeffrey and Tanya decided to take in 4 more boys from an orphanage to raise, making a total of 8 children: Taylor, Kaya, Alexis, Meseret, Tristan, Eli, Stephen, and Meliku Borlase. As time went by, the kids grew up. Their daughter, Taylor, despite the age difference, was very close to her brothers, with whom she loved to play pranks. They also shared common interests. The children were involved in sports and music. This continued until 2015, when Taylor did not finish high school and did not move to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. However, whenever the opportunity arose, the girl visited her relatives. Meanwhile, Tristan grew up like any other child. Sometimes he got annoyed with his parents, for example, when he was not allowed to use a cell phone or social media until a certain age. He was also forbidden to date girls until he graduated from high school. Overall, all the children in the family, regardless of whether they were born in marriage or adopted, grew up in a harmonious atmosphere and were not deprived of love or affection. Their loving mother closely monitored the internal order of relations between brothers and sisters, prayed frequently, and did good deeds. There was one incident that will forever remain in Robin's memory: Tanya's compassionate mother. Her daughter sold her expensive wedding ring and replaced it with a cheap one to help build houses for residents of Haiti affected by the hurricane in December 2017. Pleasant changes occurred in the life of the family as Jeffrey, his wife, and children moved to a new house in Watauga County, North Carolina. The new house was more spacious, had a larger lot, and was located just under 2 miles from Robin. This would be very convenient, especially when help was needed with babysitting. Around the same time, Tristan, who was in high school, started to participate in track and field. Alexis and Kaya worked as counselors at summer camps. At first glance, it might seem that the Borlase household never had any problems or troubles, but this was not the case. Over time, Tristan's behavior began to raise concerns. By 2019, while in high school, he started having difficulties understanding some school subjects, and these challenges only increased day by day. In addition, sometimes the boy behaved inappropriately. Although by that time he had everything, he constantly argued with his parents about his own mobile phone and access to social media. Tristan spent a lot of time on his Instagram account. The eldest of the Borlase children, Taylor, was always interested in the lives of her brothers and sisters and noticed that Tristan often quarreled with their parents. She also learned about his other problems. Some teachers tried to push Tristan to give his all. One of them was initially saw in Tristan a smart student with great potential. However, he soon became convinced that Tristan, who was frequently late for classes, was not interested in studying at all. Tristan withdrew from the school community, was indifferent to everything, and did not want to try. It got to the point where he wore headphones during class and sat with a vacant expression. The teacher tried to help Tristan, and one day after class, they had a heart-to-heart talk. It was a very productive conversation, and Tristan assured his teacher that he would try to achieve more, but in the end, he did not see any improvements. After a while, Tristan became friends with a girl from their religious community, Evelyn. They began dating, and he sometimes shared his frustrations about his relationship with his family, mentioning the frequent quarrels with his mother and father. On April 10, 2019, Tristan's teacher called his parents to complain about his academic performance and behavior. Jeffrey and Tanya left their youngest child with his grandmother and went to the middle school to understand what was happening. That same day, Taylor received a text from her mother, asking if she knew that Tristan was using illegal substances. Later, Tanya explained to Taylor that she had taken Tristan's phone to investigate the claim. After 4 p.m., Tanya informed her mother, Robin, that the conversation with Tristan had gone well. Although they had taken away his phones and car keys until he started behaving normally and focusing on school, Tristan didn't seem upset. They returned home. They decided to take the family dog for a walk together. Before that, Jeffrey headed to his van while Tanya went into the house. Much of what happened afterward cannot be fully reconstructed, but it is clear that inside the house, Tristan suddenly attacked his mother with a knife, presumably taken from the kitchen, and stabbed her deeply. At about 5 p.m., cameras and CCTV installed outside filmed Tristan running across the yard, covered in blood. At that moment, Jeffrey saw him and got out of the car. Tristan walked up to him and suddenly attacked him. As Jeffrey ran away, he tripped, and Tristan rushed at him. First, Tristan hit him with his fist and then stabbed him multiple times. Neighbors reported that on that Wednesday at about 5:30 p.m., they heard loud screams. Tristan's hands were covered in blood. He went into the kitchen, where he had previously dragged his lifeless mother's body, picked her up, and carried her outside. Then he spent about an hour cleaning up the scene, even using a hose to wash the porch near the house. Around 8:30 p.m., Tristan went to his grandmother Robin's house to pick up his younger brother. She was surprised and asked him about his parents. He said that they had gone to the store for shopping. After about 20 minutes passed without any word from Tanya and Jeffrey, Robin felt a strong worry as such behavior was extremely unusual. At that moment, another grandson called her to tell her that his parents had not picked him up as they usually did. Robin immediately contacted Alexis and Taylor. They agreed to pick up the boy and meet together at the family home. Alexis arrived first with her boyfriend. It was already dark outside. Upon entering the house, they were horrified to see traces of blood on the carpet. Assuming that Jeffrey and Tanya might be in the storehouse, they headed there. Under the hammock, they saw Jeffrey's wrapped body. Alexis rushed to him, but her boyfriend tried to hold her back. He grabbed her and dragged her toward the house, saying that they should call 911. A few seconds later, they saw Tristan driving away in his father's black car. Despite his fleeting appearance, Alexis and her boyfriend managed to notice the blood on his face and hands. Meanwhile, Tristan contacted his friend Evelyn and went to her house. She realized that he was worried about something and also noticed several scratches on his forehead and hands. However, Tristan assured her that he had just had a fight with his parents and got the scratches while playing with his dog. Around 10:30 p.m., the detective received a report filed by Alexis. He immediately went to the scene. Seeing a bloody trail in the Borlase house, the partners followed it upstairs but found nothing. Returning to the yard, they began to search it and soon came across the body of 43-year-old Jeffrey, who had stab wounds to his abdomen. Continuing the search of the area adjacent to the house, detectives found a car in the woods. Previously, relatives had reported that Jeffrey's car had disappeared from the yard. It looked like it was an unsuccessful attempt to hide the family's white 2000 Ford pickup truck. The investigators then realized why the criminal had needed it. In the cabin was the body of 44-year-old Tanya, covered with a blanket and stuffed with bags of mulch. The police began collecting evidence, noticing red stains on the floor, the dashboard, and the rear door of the car. Considering the seriousness of the events, an experienced investigator was urgently called in due to the case of serious crimes of the Watauga County Sheriff's Department. He arrived at approximately 11:35 p.m. and examined the crime scene, after which the officers reported to him the statements they had collected from relatives. Then investigator decided to take the family to the sheriff's office, as it was necessary to document the interview with each of them. First of all, the lead investigator interviewed Robin, who explained what she had been doing that day and what she had discussed with her daughter Tanya. Then it was Taylor's turn, who also told everything she knew. Tristan was undoubtedly the prime suspect, while investigators were trying to piece together the puzzle, and the family was in a state of shock. Tristan was spending time with his girlfriend. He stayed overnight with her. The next morning they went to Walmart and McDonald's. Tristan promised they would go to class together later, but that didn't happen. Evelyn believed he simply wanted to escape his parents for a bit, so he suggested staying with a relative. That same morning, Tristan invited her to get in the car, and they drove toward Tennessee. Meanwhile, a warrant was issued for the arrest of the suspected killer, and searches continued at the suspect's residence. The investigator processed evidence from the white pickup truck, which was difficult to handle because it was on a steep incline. The truck was taken to the sheriff's office, where an agent from the North Carolina Bureau of Investigation joined the team and took a total of 737 photos from the scene. At the same time, investigator learned that Tristan had been spotted in Tennessee. He began the paperwork for extraditing the suspect and considered traveling there with Robin to speak to Tristan, given that he was a minor. Information about the car was shared with the National Crime Information Center, prompting efforts in Tennessee to locate the vehicle. The search for the car began, leading to a chase. While driving with Evelyn, Tristan notices that someone seems to be following them. He told his girlfriend that he had to hurry and sharply increased speed. She naturally did not understand what was happening. To make her less confused, Tristan suggested that his parents probably reported the car as stolen to find him faster. Tristan raced along the highway but eventually succumbed and stopped. Their car was surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was completely confused seeing Tristan handcuffed and placed in a police car. Officers noticed that Tristan did not appear upset or worried. According to the county sheriff's office, both young men's clothes were stained with blood. Police officers obtained search warrants for their mobile phones. Tristan's interrogation, conducted by investigator on April 11, 2019, was recorded on video and audio. Tristan answered all questions and did not resist. At times, he was overwhelmed with emotion and cried, but he admitted that he had killed his parents, detailed all his actions. When investigator asked him about his relationship with Jeffrey, Tristan stated that he had never feared Jeffrey's cruelty, let alone that he could hit his son. Tristan also mentioned that he wanted to go back to the house but got scared when he saw police cars and fled. Accused of 2 counts of murder, Tristan Borlase was taken into custody without bail, set to appear in court on May 7, 2019. In later statements, the Watauga County Sheriff remarked that the local population had never faced such serious danger, explaining that such incidents are unpredictable and very rare. This was, of course, very sad. Speaking to local media, the district attorney thanked everyone for their joint efforts, stating that the high level of dedication shown during the investigation and the search for the truth should inspire society. The autopsy report on Tanya's body indicated that she had been stabbed several times, including in the left chest, back, and arm. She had received multiple stab wounds to her left arm, likely caused by defensive actions. Blunt trauma to the head, neck, torso, and limbs were also identified. There were reports of suffocation injuries that the victim may have sustained during neck compression. As for Jeffrey, the autopsy revealed multiple stab wounds to his left chest and back, in addition to cut wounds to his arms and hands, abrasions to his scalp and forehead, blunt force trauma to his torso and limbs. Jeffrey and Tanya's funeral took place on April 17, 2019, at the Alliance Bible Fellowship. Relatives of the victims wrote a mournful obituary in which all 7 children expressed that Tanya and Jeffrey never had the opportunity to live for themselves, as they always lived only for their children. Instead of flowers, memorial contributions to the family fund were requested. By this time, search warrants had been issued to examine data from home surveillance cameras, video call accounts allegedly belonging to Tristan, and a total of 5 mobile phones that could contain information related to the crime. Having gained access to the CCTV footage, detective investigator began reconstructing the chronology of events. The investigators continued their work. Inside the car, they found Tristan's report card from Watauga County School, several pens, electronic cigarettes, a plastic container with purchases, and a receipt from McDonald's issued at 6:40 a.m. on April 11, 2019. Additionally, they found a North Carolina driver's license issued in the name of Jeffrey Borlase in the glove compartment. In the driver's side door compartment was a black pocket knife with stains on the blade that looked like blood. A week after Tristan's arrest, Taylor visited him in jail for the first time and was unpleasantly surprised by his behavior. Tristan was not only unrepentant but also tried to blame others for what happened. He was convinced that sooner or later he would regain his freedom. Taylor felt disgusted, turned around, and left. Her second visit was on May 11th, on the occasion of Tristan's birthday. This time, she brought Robin. However, this meeting was almost indistinguishable from the previous one. For Taylor, such behavior was unacceptable, especially considering that their parents had died tragically, and she was now responsible for taking care of her orphaned brothers and sisters. After 3 weeks, the neighbors decided to help the Borlase children, organized a fundraising campaign to cover the costs of maintaining the property, food, gasoline, car insurance, and clothes. During this time, Tristan had phone conversations from the prison cell, where he insisted on a new version of events. According to him, his mother first attacked him from behind while he was sitting at the table doing his homework. The trial of Tristan began on February 16, 2022. His lawyer stated that his client was responsible for murder, but not for the charge of first-degree murder. The prosecution, Assistant District Attorney Jasmine McKinney, told jurors that despite being a very large family with children who were not always well-behaved, they never lacked love. Testimonies were heard from 5 witnesses, 2 of whom were law enforcement officers, and 3 were relatives of the victims, including Robin, Taylor, and Alexis. On February 17th, the jury was presented with diagrams of the crime scene, obtained from photographic work. Also on this day, Evelyn testified. On February 20th, during the fourth day of the trial, 3 witnesses were questioned. On the 5th day, a pathologist shared her findings, although Tristan's defense objected to the display of post-mortem photographs of Jeffrey and Tanya. The judge allowed the images to be shown, ensuring that they were not extreme, pointless, or used solely to incite passion. Using post-mortem diagrams and autopsy footage taken by an experienced photographer, the pathologist noted that both deceased individuals had small abrasions on their palms and forearms, indicating they were trying to defend themselves from the weapon used by the criminal. Jeffrey and Tanya attempted to shield themselves with their hands when they were attacked, but unfortunately, it was to no avail. She reported that the cause of death for both spouses was stab wounds to the body. After the lunch break, the prosecution called Tristan for questioning. He was asked to describe what his father and mother were like. Tristan said that in their house, they always loved to read and laughed a lot, but there was also constant chaos due to the large number of children and animals. He noted that Jeffrey and Tanya focused on raising their children, teaching them to help each other and show compassion. Tristan remembered having disagreements with his parents but believed they never crossed the line. Rather, there was always an opportunity to discuss problems and misunderstandings openly. Detective investigator was called to the courtroom and testified using video recordings from surveillance cameras. The 9th day of the trial took place on February 28, 2022. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Tristan Borlase guilty and sentenced him to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. In a later statement, the district attorney expressed his sincere hope that this decision would bring closure to the Borlase family. According to the latest news, Tristan faces additional charges for a fight in prison. Tristan was charged with a misdemeanor for assaulting another inmate, allegedly punching him in the face and kneeing him in the chest. Taylor and Alexis continue to care for the children and console them with the hope that their parents are not in pain and are looking down on them from heaven, concerned for each of their children. The children will never forget the love and care their mom, dad surrounded them with. Undoubtedly, Jeffrey and Tanya Borlase became symbols of kindness and mercy, which they generously bestowed upon the world during their lives. Mariana Jocelyn Baltira Valenzuela was born on November 24, 1998, in the city of Ixtapan de la Sal, located in the state of Mexico. She is the older sibling of 2 children from a modest family. Fate decreed that she had to fight for her life from her first days. She was born much earlier than expected, and doctors seriously feared that the child, with a critically low weight, would not survive, which they informed her parents, Syra and Orlando. Mariana spent the first 2 months of her life in a hospital, in a special ward for premature babies. Her mother prayed day and night for her daughter's health, and her prayers were answered. The girl quickly recovered and gained weight. By the new year of 1999, she was discharged home, allowing her parents to celebrate the holiday with their daughter. Fortunately, Mariana had no external consequences of prematurity. She grew up slim and beautiful, but her health was very poor from a very early age. When Mariana was 4 years old, a second child appeared in the family, a boy. Mariana adored her younger brother and helped her parents take care of him. From the earliest age, they were very close and practically inseparable. At the age of 6, Mariana was diagnosed with epilepsy, which required her to regularly take special medications to minimize the likelihood of seizures. The prescribed drugs and constant monitoring by specialists yielded good results, allowing her to lead a relatively ordinary life, not too different from her peers. Moreover, she treated her health responsibly, following the regimen and taking the necessary medications. Mariana studied well at school, drew beautifully, and loved music. She was a very kind, open, and sincere girl. Everyone who knew her personally spoke positively about her. However, she was also modest and shy, especially in her teenage years. She had only a couple of best friends, did not go on dates, did not attend parties, and hardly interacted with boys. Mariana preferred to spend time at home with her family, with whom she had very close and warm relationships. The fragile and petite girl looked much younger than her age. At 16, she seemed no older than 13. Kind-hearted and sympathetic, Mariana always tried to help homeless animals, which she fed, treated, looked after, and then handed over to safe hands. As a high school student, she finally decided to become a veterinarian and provide professional assistance to those in need. Her parents often said that their daughter was too naive and trusting. She didn't perceive evil or danger from other people, as she herself brought only light and kindness into the world. Therefore, her father and mother were always worried that Mariana could be offended or harmed by someone taking advantage of her innocence. The area where the Baltira family lived was relatively calm. Almost everyone who lived there knew each other by sight. However, along their street, there were a large number of shops where many migrant workers worked unofficially. Some of them lived right in the shops, as most did not have their own housing, and some could not even afford to rent a room. Naturally, among these workers were individuals with extensive criminal histories. But, as long as they performed their duties properly, the shop owners usually had no complaints about them. About 50 meters from the Baltira family home was a butcher shop. The shop owner hired 4 workers, 2 locals who sold goods, 2 immigrants unloading cargo, butchered carcasses, and cleaned the store. The shop owner allowed the workers to stay on the second floor of the shop, which was an attic. As Mariana grew older, her parents began to periodically ask her to go shopping for the family, including to the aforementioned butcher shop. There she repeatedly encountered one Cruz Quintero Martinez, a worker of the landlord who lived on the second floor. She felt fear of this man just by his presence. She repeatedly told her friends and her parents that there was something sinister in his gaze that made her blood run cold. At the same time, there was nothing specific she could blame on this man since he did not approach her or attempt to contact her in any way, but merely looked at her. So her parents decided not to let their daughter go to this store anymore and went shopping for the necessities themselves. At some point, Juan Martinez committed a minor theft, resulting in the store owner's decision to fire him. After that incident, they did not hear from him for about a year. However, in early summer 2017, he returned to his former workplace, tearfully begged his former employer to rehire him, assuring him that he would work diligently. Remarkably, he was rehired and moved back into the second floor of the store. Cyrus' niece was visiting the Baltiras while Mariana and her younger brother were on summer vacation, with Orlando being the only one at work. Around 9 a.m., Syra asked her daughter to go to the local supermarket to buy breakfast. She believed her daughter was old enough to handle such a task. Moreover, the street was well lit and crowded. In her opinion, nothing bad could happen. She gave her daughter some money and asked Mariana to buy milk, eggs, and vegetables. Mariana left the house dressed in an old t-shirt and pajama pants. The store was located less than a couple of hundred meters from their house, so the round trip to get there, buy the necessary items, and return should not have taken more than half an hour. However, when an hour passed and Mariana still had not returned, her mother grew concerned, especially since Mariana's phone was left at home. With her little niece in her arms, Syra went to look for her daughter. She walked down the street to the store and asked the cashiers if they had seen a young girl in glasses. They informed her that a girl fitting her description had bought groceries a quarter of an hour ago and had left the store. Panic began to set in. Syra realized that something terrible had happened. Syra returned home, asked her son to look after his niece, and then went out to the street, where she began asking neighbors, street vendors, and passers-by if they had seen her daughter. However, it seemed as if the girl had vanished without a trace. Syra immediately reported the incident to the police and called her husband, who rushed home from work to help find their daughter. By the time the police arrived at the scene, dozens of neighbors, as well as relatives and friends of the Baltira family, had already joined the search. They called all of Mariana's acquaintances, combed the streets, and posted printed leaflets with her photographs. Initially, law enforcement officials were not particularly concerned about the situation. They asked the parents whether their daughter could have gone on a date or visited someone. Syra and Orlando insisting that their daughter would never go anywhere without informing them, especially since she had gone to the store in her home clothes and with a grocery bag, knowing she was expected back home. There were surveillance cameras installed in the area where Mariana disappeared, but almost none of them were functional. The entire day of searching yielded no results, and not a single trace of the girl was found. As night fell, anxiety and panic turned into despair. The parents realized that they would likely never see Mariana alive again. The next day, July 28, at about 8 a.m., Mariana's parents received a call from a nearby relative, who informed them that several police cars had arrived at a butcher's shop. Without hesitation, the Baltira got ready and went to the indicated location. Law enforcement agencies did not allow them inside. But Syra and Orlando had no intention of leaving. Minutes after checking the scene, one of the police officers informed Orlando that the body of a young girl, identified as the missing Mariana, had been found on the second floor of the building, lifeless and badly mutilated. Orlando was invited inside to confirm her identity, but Syra was strongly advised against entering, as the crime scene was truly shocking. Orlando could not believe his eyes as he looked at the body lying in a puddle of blood, his daughter. His world collapsed in an instant, and he did not know how to tell his wife, who was waiting outside. Mariana had been repeatedly abused and brutally mutilated. The cause of death was massive blood loss due to a stab wound to the stomach. The perpetrator cut open her abdomen while she was still alive, leaving her to bleed to death. An expert opinion showed that her death occurred on the night of July 27th, just a few hours before the discovery of her body. Therefore, she was alive for almost 24 hours from the time of her disappearance, during which the criminal abused her until he fatally wounded her. The murder weapon, a knife intended for cutting up carcasses, was found on the floor next to her body. The body was discovered by the owner of the store when he arrived for work that morning. According to him, every last Thursday of the month was designated as cleaning day, during which he did not work. On that day, the owner was engaged in organizational matters, meetings with suppliers, and submitting reports to the tax office while his employees cleaned and disinfected the premises. When he arrived in the morning, he immediately noticed blood stains on the floor. Initially thinking that one of his employees living on the second floor had been injured, he was shocked to find bloody men's clothing, a knife, and the body of a young girl in a pool of blood. In addition, a large sum of money had gone missing from the cash register, which the criminal had evidently taken upon fleeing. Two men who lived and worked at the store immediately came under suspicion. However, one of them showed up for work an hour later, appearing just as shocked as everyone else. He explained that he had to return home to another city urgently, and his colleague, Juan, said Juan would cover for him and clean the store himself. The police concluded that this man was telling the truth, noting that there were no traces of him at the crime scene, and he was excluded from the list of suspects. By that time, CCTV footage from the supermarket, which Mariana had visited on the last day of her life, was obtained. The footage showed she entering the store, followed by one a few minutes later, the man who worked at the butcher's shop and had instilled genuine fear in Mariana. He stalked his victim like a wild animal hunting prey, following her out of the supermarket without purchasing anything. After that, both of their trails vanished. Reconstructing the sequence of events outside the store proved impossible. Although there were cameras on the street, they were non-functional, and none of the numerous passers-by or street sellers reported anything suspicious. Mariana's parents were convinced that their daughter would never have gone with this man, no matter how he might have lured her. They believed he had forcibly taken her to the store. However, they were left wondering why she did not scream or call for help, and why none of the many passers-by or street vendors noticed anything unusual about the situation. 27-year-old Juan Cruz Quintero Martinez was characterized as withdrawn and uncommunicative. Those who knew him said that he was a violent person with sadistic tendencies, which he displayed towards homeless animals. Previously, he had attracted the attention of the police for harassment and causing serious bodily harm. He got a job as a worker in a butcher's shop in early 2015. For a long time, according to the shop owner, there were no questions or complaints about him. Juan did his job conscientiously, but in mid-2016, he was caught stealing money and was subsequently fired. After losing his job, he returned to his parents' home, where his sick elderly mother and his sister, who took care of her, lived. For almost a year, Juan literally sat on their necks, stealing money, selling things from the house, abusing alcohol, and using illegal substances. In addition, he regularly beat his mother and sister. One day, tired of the constant bullying, his sister threatened to call the police if he did not leave the house. Juan, unwilling to deal with law enforcement again, obediently left. Since he had nowhere else to go, he asked his former employer to rehire him. The owner of the butcher shop agreed, providing him with a place to work and a roof over his head, allowing him to continue living on the second floor. It was mid-June 2017, just a month before the tragedy. Juan did his job conscientiously, but about a week later, he met Mariana, who had come of age and literally drove him crazy. She avoided him and never went to that store for shopping. Nevertheless, Juan began to follow her on the streets, discovering where she was going, what paths she was choosing. The second worker who lived with him also noticed his unhealthy interest in Mariana and even tried to joke about it, not suspecting that Juan would soon commit a crime. After Juan became the only suspect in the brutal abuse and murder of Mariana, all available resources were put into searching for him. Initially, law enforcement agencies went to his house, believing that relatives might help him escape. However, his sister insisted that he was not welcome there and that Juan knew his relatives would immediately hand him over to the police. She was not even surprised by the terrible crime her brother had committed. Moreover, she described how he had abused her elderly mother and even attacked the old woman with a knife, threatening to cut her open like a pig if he was not given money for illegal substances. The search for the killer was a priority for the police because Juan was extremely aggressive, violent, and dangerous to others. The money stolen from the cash register would have lasted him a long time, but no one knew how he would behave next or whether he would commit another crime after killing. Throughout the month, the search continued in the Ecatepec area and surrounding suburbs because the police believed that the criminal could not have gone far. However, time passed, and no trace of Juan was found. Soon, information about the abuse and brutal murder of Mariana reached national news, and police from across the state joined the search for the brutal criminal. Juan Martinez's photo appeared daily on television news, was printed on the front pages of newspapers, and was posted on streets all over the country with the note, "Ruthless Killer at Large." A large cash reward was announced for information about his whereabouts, as well as for assistance in his arrest, which was constantly increasing. But even this did not contribute to any progress in the case. The search for the criminal proved difficult, as he had not maintained contact with any relatives and had no friends. Additionally, Juan did not have social media pages and did not even use a mobile phone, let alone credit cards. After 6 months of unsuccessful search attempts, the reward for any information about him was increased to 500,000 Mexican pesos. Even this, however, did not help. Justice for the murder took over 2 years, finally arriving in August 2019 when her executioner was located and arrested. He was found in another state, almost 1,000 kilometers from the crime scene, when he was accidentally recognized on the street by a vigilant elderly woman. He constantly hid his face behind a hood and sunglasses, seemed suspicious to her, so she decided to report him to the police, not suspecting that he was one of Mexico's most wanted criminals. Juan was arrested right on one of the city streets, and to the surprise of law enforcement agencies, he did not even resist. He obediently held out his hands, allowing them to put handcuffs on him. The next day, after his identity was confirmed, the criminal was taken to the city of Ecatepec, where he had committed his crime. He was placed in custody in one of the city's prisons awaiting trial. In May 2022, 5 years after the tragedy, the killer and abuser was finally sentenced. Juan Martinez received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Additionally, he was ordered to pay 1 million Mexican pesos in compensation for moral damages to the family of Mariana. Mariana's parents and brother said the arrest of the killer was a huge relief to them as he would certainly not be able to harm other girls. However, even life imprisonment and a large monetary compensation cannot erase the pain from their hearts, as their beloved daughter and sister will not return. They will have to live with this for the rest of their days.
On Valentine's Day in Tijuana, Elizabeth was excited about a second date with a man she had recently met. As usual, she let her family know where she was going, even shared her location for safety. Initially, everything seemed fine. However, her messages suddenly stopped. Her phone went quiet, and her car was missing. By the next morning, her family began searching everywhere for her, hoping to find any clue. What they uncovered shattered their hearts and revealed a more disturbing situation in the city. Elizabeth was not alone. Her case was just the start of a troubling pattern. Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa was born in 1996 in Tijuana, Baja California, a city on the border between Mexico and the United States. She was the youngest of 7 siblings. People who knew her described Elizabeth as a cheerful and gentle young woman who had a strong bond with her mother. Her mother was more than just a mother to her. She was her anchor, confidant, and main source of strength. By early 2022, Elizabeth accomplished something her family had never achieved before. She graduated with a degree in international trade and business from a private university. This was a significant milestone, but it didn't satisfy her ambitions. She aspired to pursue a master's degree to create more opportunities for herself and her family. While planning her educational journey, Elizabeth also managed a small clothing business. To boost her income, she worked as a dancer in a bar located in Zona Norte, a popular nightlife area for both tourists and locals. Like many women in her situation, Elizabeth was careful. She kept her family updated, especially when meeting clients. She shared her location, maintained communication, and trusted her instincts. This cautious habit would later play a crucial role in the effort to track her last movements. On February 14, 2022, Valentine's Day, Elizabeth seemed excited. She had lunch with her mother that afternoon, which turned out to be their last meal together. Later that evening, she had a second date with a man she had recently met at work. He was American. Elizabeth confided in her brother, expressing that while she was uncertain about him, her curiosity led her to give him another chance. Staying true to her usual habits, she promised to keep in touch, send updates, and share her location. Some reports indicate they met again at a bar, while others suggest she picked him up near a border crossing in her white SUV. They went to a Brazilian restaurant for dinner and then drove to a motel close to the beaches of Tijuana. Elizabeth informed her family that she would be gone for no more than 4 hours. At the start of the night, everything appeared normal. She kept sending her location, and her messages reassured her family about her safety. They knew where she was and who she was with. However, then the updates suddenly stopped. There were no more messages, no answered calls, and no signs that she was moving. This silence was not just worrisome, it was overwhelming. Her family's anxiety grew rapidly. The lack of communication was completely out of character for someone as careful and responsible as Elizabeth. It quickly became a clear sign that something was seriously wrong. As the hours went by, the feeling of dread intensified, marking the onset of a nightmare that no one was ready to face. When hours went by without any news of Elizabeth, her family didn't hesitate to take action. That same night, filled with fear and uncertainty, they started searching for her on their own. Their first stop was the bar where she worked, but the response they received was shocking. Elizabeth had not come in that day. Her concerned co-workers provided the family with an important lead, a detailed description of the man she was supposed to meet. They described him as overweight, with light brown skin and visible acne scars. He was a frequent customer at the bar, and although he didn't have a name, the description was detailed enough to help the family in their search. By February 15th, the family was increasingly worried due to the lack of news about Elizabeth. They decided to report her disappearance to local authorities, but encountered a common hurdle: bureaucracy. They were informed that they had to wait 24 hours before they could file an official report. Determined not to delay, they took to social media, creating pages, sharing photos, and soliciting the public's help. Despite their efforts, it felt as though Elizabeth and her white Jeep Liberty had completely disappeared. On February 16th, authorities officially expanded the report to include her missing vehicle. GPS tracking of Elizabeth's phone showed her movements, first to a Brazilian restaurant near the river, then to a motel, and finally to a park. The last recorded location was a downtown hotel in Tijuana. Her brother hurried there, but hotel staff denied him entry, and there was still no sign of Elizabeth or her Jeep. On Thursday, February 17th, her family used the vehicle's GPS history to track it to a street in Zona Norte. A sense of dread settled over them. Something was definitely wrong. Elizabeth's mother and brother drove directly to the location. Although the Jeep was there, Elizabeth was not. They called the police, and officers and firefighters arrived within minutes to secure the area. Their attention quickly turned to the trunk of the vehicle. What they discovered confirmed the worst fears of Elizabeth's family. Her lifeless body was inside, naked and curled up in a fetal position, exhibiting clear signs of violence. The heartbreaking scene devastated her family, leaving them in shock and disbelief. Elizabeth's family spoke out about her murder, the silence and inaction that preceded it. They highlighted a system that failed to respond when she went missing and the long wait for justice. The story quickly gained attention and sparked outrage throughout the city. Friends, co-workers, even strangers gathered at the scene. Elizabeth's body was taken to the forensic medical service for a complete autopsy. The findings were troubling. She had multiple blunt force injuries on her face, chest, and abdomen. A deep mark on her neck indicated an attempted strangulation. Additionally, there were signs of asphyxiation due to blockage of both her mouth and nose. Forensic experts determined that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. The investigation did not provide any information on possible abuse assault. Nonetheless, the case is officially categorized as a femicide, and an investigation is underway to find her murderer. The tragedy continued for the family after Elizabeth's passing. Just 3 days later, her mother suffered a sudden heart attack and died. Although the official cause was cardiac failure, many believed it was due to overwhelming grief that her body could not bear. As the family laid both mother and daughter to rest, the investigation picked up speed. Local and state authorities began to connect Elizabeth's case with others in the area. A frightening realization surfaced. This was not an isolated incident. The method of killing shared unsettling similarities with 2 other cases of young women who also worked in nightlife scene in Zona Norte. Karen, a 28-year-old mother from Veracruz, went missing on August 30th, 2021 after meeting a man at a motel. 3 days later, her body was discovered in a local garbage dump, showing obvious signs of violence. Karen had recently started working as a dancer and escort. She was careful about her safety, only meeting clients through direct phone calls. Before she left that day, she informed both a friend and a relative about her plans. Despite their quick efforts to find her, the situation ended in tragedy. Security cameras recorded the vehicle used by the man she met, and a friend later identified him from the video. However, surprisingly, no arrest warrant was issued, and the man remained at large. Angela Carolina Acosta Flores was only 20 years old when she was found dead in a hotel room on January 24, 2022, near the bar where Elizabeth worked. Like Elizabeth and Karen, Angela had gone to meet a man described as American and possibly of Hispanic descent. Her phone was missing from the crime scene, and when investigators traced it, they found it had been taken to Riverside, California, across the border. This discovery alarmed the investigators. 3 women had been brutally murdered, all linked by time, location, and method. Each case involved a mysterious man, likely American, and all 3 women were associated with the nightlife in the same area. They were killed within a 6-month period, leading to a troubling conclusion. There may be a serial killer targeting vulnerable women in Zona Norte. On Wednesday, November 16, 2022, the Baja California State Prosecutor held a highly anticipated press conference. With a room full of reporters and the nation watching, he confirmed a troubling presence. A serial killer was active in Tijuana. The prosecutor revealed that the suspect specifically targeted exotic dancers and escort who belonged to one of the city's most at-risk groups. His method was alarming. He would travel from the United States into Mexico, commit his crimes, and then escape back across the border, making it difficult for authorities to catch him. At that time, no additional details were shared to avoid compromising the investigation or alerting the suspect. Meanwhile, the manhunt for the killer was intensifying. Nearly a month later, on December 13th, the prosecutor held a second press conference. This time, the news was shocking. They had identified a suspect, an American citizen, whose psychological profile resembled that of Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial killers from the 1970s. However, there was a complication. The man had already left Mexico. Although a local arrest warrant was issued, it wasn't sufficient. Authorities sought a red notice from Interpol to enhance international cooperation. The FBI and U.S. consulates joined the search, and the suspect's physical description was made public to help locate him. Experts also conducted new forensic tests to ensure that no accomplices were missed. The breakthrough in the investigation came from detailed profiling. Investigators identified the man's methods. He targeted young women who were petite, attractive, and vulnerable. He portrayed himself as polite, respectful, and generous to gain their trust and lower their defenses. Once he had their confidence, he would lure them to secluded areas where he would then attack them. Each of the three known victims, Elizabeth Martinez, Karen, and Angela Carolina Acosta Flores, suffered extreme violence, with visible injuries primarily to their faces and chests. His method of asphyxiation was a defining characteristic. Two of the victims were found without clothes, while the third, although still dressed, had more injuries, indicating she may have fought back. This was not a crime of passion. It was deliberate, predatory, and systematic. Although these three cases gained media attention, they were not isolated. At the time of Elizabeth's disappearance, there were already rumors about other missing women with similar ages, professions, and unfortunate outcomes. Their stories have quietly faded away without resolution. As the investigation progressed, authorities were under pressure to act quickly. Although the suspect's identity remained confidential, local media labeled him as the Ted Bundy of Tijuana. His actual name was Bryant Rivera, a U.S. citizen with several known addresses in Southern California. Authorities searched these locations, but he was nowhere to be found. Family members described Bryant as working in e-commerce. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's family was actively seeking justice for her. On February 14, 2023, marking 1 year since her murder, they revisited the site where her body was discovered and placed a floral tribute in the shape of a heart. Her brother spoke to reporters, expressing his deep sorrow and anger. A year had passed, and Bryant remained at large. The family's lawyer had been denied access to the case details, and the prosecutor's office had not provided any updates. Additionally, Elizabeth's Jeep Liberty, which was part of the crime scene, had yet to be returned. On July 6, 2023, Bryant was arrested in Los Angeles. The arrest took place calmly at his parents' home. However, he was only charged with the murder of Angela Carolina. While the murders of Karen and Elizabeth were not included in the U.S. charges, even though Mexico had made an active extradition request for all three cases, the Baja California prosecutor publicly confirmed Bryant's arrest, stating it was a result of collaboration between local and federal law enforcement agencies in the U.S. Bryant was assigned a public defender and requested bail. The judge denied the bail request, citing concerns about Bryant being a flight risk and a potential danger to women. He was ordered to remain in custody at Los Angeles County Jail. His family firmly rejected all allegations against him. His mother claimed he could never commit such acts of violence, and his sister even wrote a letter to support his character. However, the evidence suggested otherwise. On June 29, 2023, a federal judge in Los Angeles approved Mexico's request to extradite him. Family members of Angela were present at the hearing, along with the brother of Elizabeth. The courtroom was heavy with the sorrow of three grieving families. The judge emphasized that Bryant would remain in custody. As of June 2025, the extradition process is still ongoing. Legal experts estimate it could take up to 2 years to complete. If convicted of all three murders, Bryant could potentially face a total of 180 years in prison. However, due to Mexican law, the maximum sentence he could actually serve is 50 years. In addition, Mexican prosecutors have suggested that Bryant might be connected to a fourth victim, prompting them to investigate unsolved cases of missing women. Investigators are also re-examining surveillance footage from hotels and motels to determine if this predator has been active for a longer period than initially suspected. The situation surrounding Elizabeth has evolved from a personal tragedy to a representation of a larger national issue. Her death, along with the deaths of Karen and Angela, underscores the serious stigma and disregard that women in the escort industry encounter. When Elizabeth went missing, authorities did not intervene. Instead, it was her family who located her. It was her online activity, rather than official procedures, that ultimately pointed to her killer. Even now, despite an arrest, justice has not been achieved. The murder of Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa is a heartbreaking reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by women in Tijuana's nightlife and the devastating consequences of a system that too often fails them. Her vibrant spirit, her dreams of a brighter future, and her deep bond with her family were cruelly extinguished, leaving a void that echoes through her community. The cases of Elizabeth, Karen, and Angela reveal a chilling pattern of violence that demands urgent action. As Bryant Rivera's extradition process drags on, Elizabeth's family and countless others continue their relentless pursuit of justice, refusing to let her story fade into silence. This tragedy is not just a personal loss, but a rallying cry to confront the stigma, neglect, and impunity that perpetuate such crimes.
In 1995, 11-year-old Lacey Phillips lived with her mother, Mary, her father, James, and her older siblings. Brother Jesse, who was 15 at the time, and sister Darla, who was 17. The family was very close-knit and had a strong bond. The Phillips family lived in their own home in a small town called Bald Knob, Arkansas, which they had moved to 5 years earlier from Hope, Arkansas. They considered Bald Knob an ideal place for family life and raising children. Mary was known as a loving mother and wife, fond of gardening, outdoor recreation. The Phillips family was a typical American family, slowly building their happiness, unaware of how cruelly it would eventually be destroyed. On June 6, 1995, 11-year-old Lacey was under the supervision of her older sister, Darla. Both were students, but summer vacation had begun. Their mothers go to work during this time, and often the children will stay at home waiting for their parents to return. However, at 4 p.m. that day, Lacey had an appointment with the dentist, which coincided with Mary's end of her work shift. Consequently, Darla drove Lacey to the workplace, where their mother worked as an accountant in an automated tax and accounting service. It was planned that Lacey would wait until her mother finished work and then go to the appointment together. Darla later described this outing as completely ordinary. She talked with Mary for a while, and then Darla went home, planning to meet her friends later. She and her mother said goodbye and hugged, unaware that this would be their last meeting. Although Mary and Lacey were expected to be a little late coming back from the dentist, it was merely a routine checkup that wasn't supposed to take long. Meanwhile, Jesse and Darla were left alone at home. Their father was on a business trip 500 kilometers away. The siblings expected their mother and Lacey to return by 5 p.m., but as much more time passed with no sign of mother, they began to worry. At around 6 p.m., both teenagers grew increasingly worried as neither returned from the dentist's office. Lacey is too young to have her own plans, and Mary had no other plans for the evening. Even if something had changed, Mary always called the children to inform them if she would be late. Her uncharacteristic absence without warning heightened their concern. Darla assumed her mother might be late at work, so she called the office but received no answer. Concerned, she then headed to the dental clinic, but there was no sign of Mary or Lacey. Time passed, and as the sun began to set, Darla contacted their father to share their growing worries. He suggested they leave the house and look around the area, considering that Mary's car might have broken down or she might need help. Jesse and Darla searched the vicinity but found nothing. They returned to their house and reported their findings to their father, prompting him to contact the police. A dispatch officer spoke to James to gather necessary information. He provided details about where Mary worked, the car she drove, and their trip to the dentist set for around 4 p.m. The most alarming fact was that Mary and Lacey never reached the dentist. Law enforcement took James's report seriously, confirming that no one had arrived at the dental office. Around midnight, an officer was dispatched to check Mary's workplace. Upon arrival at the parking lot in front of the building, the patrolman noticed a pickup truck parked alone. After checking the license plate, he confirmed it was indeed Mary Phillips' vehicle. This discovery intensified fears that something had gone terribly wrong. The car was intact and locked, so the officer decided to check the office where Mary worked. He knocked on the door, which surprisingly opened because it was unlocked. Upon entering, he found the lights were off and had to use a flashlight to explore. It was then that he discovered something horrifying: the body of a woman covered in blood, with her hands tightly bound behind her back. A cord from a household appliance was wrapped around her neck, and her clothes were pulled down. The officer immediately realized she had been brutally beaten. A pulse check indicated she was dead. The body was cold, suggesting she had been killed hours earlier. The office resembled the aftermath of a violent struggle, with blood scattered around, intensifying concerns that the perpetrator might still be present. The patrolman called for reinforcements and continued to carefully inspect the rooms while waiting for his colleagues to arrive. He checked the office and then moved to the utility rooms, where he noticed a trail of blood leading to another door, which was also unlocked. He entered without any problems and saw a gruesome scene. In the middle of the room was a chair to which a girl was tied, also covered in blood. There was especially a lot of blood. Her face showed clear signs of having received several blows to the head. Thought the girl was dead, he managed to take several pictures of the second victim when she suddenly woke up, opened her eyes, and looked in his direction. Later, the police officer recalled this moment as one of the most terrible and unexpected in his life, as if he had seen a dead person returning to life. The patrolman immediately turned to his colleagues and, in addition to requesting reinforcements, asked them to call for doctors. He freed the girl and tried to provide first aid, but it quickly became obvious that she was in serious condition and that only doctors could fully help her. Despite her injuries, she was conscious and could speak. She clearly stated that her name was Lacey Phillips. The only thing that worried her was her mother's condition. She asked several times what had happened to Mary and if everything was okay with her, but the policeman distracted her from these troubling thoughts, not telling her the truth. The medics arrived a few minutes later, and Lacey was urgently taken to the nearest medical facility. On the way, she regained consciousness and then lost it again. Lacey had sustained a serious head injury from several strong blows to the head with a blunt object. Additionally, marks were found on her neck indicating strangulation, and in addition to sustaining a fracture in her cranial vault, she had a broken jaw. Mary's husband, James, was notified that something had happened to his loved ones but was given no details. He immediately packed his things and left for the city to see his daughter in the hospital to support her. He was shocked and did not understand what had happened to his family. Now, the doctors did not dare to provide a prognosis on whether the Phillips' youngest daughter, Lacey, would survive. An even greater blow was the death of 34-year-old Mary. She could not be saved and had died before the patrolman arrived. Forensic experts worked at the crime scene but were unable to find any clues that would lead to the criminal. Their only hope was Lacey, who had miraculously survived the attack, and they awaited news from the medical center with excitement. A few hours later, doctors managed to stabilize Lacey's condition. The morning after the attack, on June 7th, she woke up in hospital. She was in the intensive care unit, and they were finally able to communicate. Despite her traumatic brain injury, she remembered perfectly what had happened. Later, Lacey admitted that all of it was captured in her memory. Lacey began to recount the frightening details of how her older sister had taken her to their mother's workplace at about 3 p.m. She remained in the office until 3:45 p.m., as both of them were getting ready to go to the dentist's office for a routine checkup. The workday was almost over. But a few minutes before it ended, an unfamiliar man entered the office. He immediately headed to the desk where Mary worked. She and Mary looked at him and even stepped back. There was something frightening in his gaze, but they thought he was just a client who had come into the office. When the stranger raised his hands, it became obvious that he was not there for advice. He was wearing latex gloves. In one hand, he held a roll of wire, and in the other, a gun with which he threatened Mary and Lacey. The man announced that it was a robbery. Mary tried to cover herself and protect her daughter, but he pushed Mary's aside, knocked her to the floor, and began tying her wrists behind her back with the wire. Lacey was confused, scared, and unable to react. Everything happened too quickly. After tying up Mary, the unknown man shouted at Lacey and ordered her to follow him into another room. He brought a chair from Mary's office, placed it in the middle of the room, and forced she to sit on it while he tied her hands to the chair behind her back. She cried, begged him not to harm her and her mother. The criminal said he would not harm Mary but would hurt her daughter. After securing Lacey to the chair with wire, he immediately hit her hard on the head with the handle of the pistol. Her eyes went dark, and she lost consciousness. After which, the stranger left the room, closing the door behind him. Lacey was left alone. She was tightly tied up and couldn't even move. She felt like she was bleeding from her head. Lacey regained consciousness a few minutes later, looked around, and saw that blood was all around the chair. She was in pain, but she couldn't imagine the extent of the head injury she had sustained. She began to scream and call for help, hoping that her mother would enter the room and untie her. The door swung open, and to her horror, it was the same man again. He was furious that she was still alive and screamed, striking she again before grabbing her by the neck and beginning to strangle her until she lost consciousness once more. This lasted for several minutes. Perhaps the criminal was afraid of being caught, so he wanted to escape from the building as quickly as possible. He believed he had killed Lacey, turned off the light, and left the room. The criminal immediately fled the office. Several hours passed. Lacey came to her senses but then lost consciousness again. Each time she regained consciousness, she tried to get free and call for her mother but received no response. Her hands were tightly bound with metal wire. Lacey grew weaker with every minute. The only hope for salvation was the thought that someone would find them. About 8 hours passed during which Lacey remained locked in the dark room, bleeding. She was half asleep, could barely move, and had lost all strength. Suddenly, the girl heard a faint clicking sound coming from the next room. At first, she was scared that it was the attacker, but then the sounds were repeated next to her, and flashes appeared in her half-asleep state. Lacey realized it looked like a photo shoot. She confirmed it when she opened her eyes and saw someone taking her picture. Fortunately, it was not the criminal, it was a policeman who had arrived at the office to check on Lacey. Lacey remembered how the ambulance had arrived, how the policeman freed her. She was losing and regaining consciousness on the way to the intensive care unit of the nearest children's hospital. All this time, the doctors talked to her to keep her conscious. At each moment of clarity, Lacey tried to find out what had happened to her mother, but she never received an answer to any of her questions. Even now, while talking to the police, she still did not know that Mary was dead. After the police visit to the hospital, her father, brother, and sister came into the ward. They brought balloons and soft toys. Lacey still believed that her mother, like her, was in the hospital and had probably also suffered at the hands of the attacker but was still alive. The whole day of June 7th, Lacey's relatives spent with she, but they never answered any of her questions about Mary. She saw how, with each passing moment, her father's eyes filled with tears. Doubt began to creep in, but at that time, Lacey was still too weak and simply pushed away the bad thoughts. In the evening, James gathered his strength, went up to his daughter, knelt down, and hugged her. In a trembling voice, he told her that Mary was now in heaven with her great-grandmother. The detective leading the investigation could not afford to be sentimental, as the criminal responsible for the attack was still on the loose and might strike again. The local residents were in danger, and the bloodthirsty killer had to be stopped urgently. When Lacey found out about this, she realized with horror that she was the only chance for the police to catch the criminal. She also understood that she was in great danger and that the attacker might return to eliminate her as an unwanted witness. In the office where he committed the murder and attempted murder, the stranger left no traces. He managed to avoid leaving evidence by using latex gloves, which Lacey reported. However, he left biological fluids after abusing Mary, but their examination would take time, and the research capabilities of that era were much more modest. Therefore, the results only allowed the police to limit the circle of suspects, which at that point was not substantial. The criminal was likely an experienced killer. He knew how to avoid being caught, acted covertly, and used gloves. However, the police still had the main source of information, Lacey. She remembered the attacker perfectly and provided a very detailed description, including the smallest details of his clothing, appearance. Having learned that this man had taken her mother away from her, she was determined to bring him to justice. Describing the face of the criminal, Lacey suddenly recalled one important detail. Before he struck her on the head, while he had tied her hands with metal wire, she noticed a teardrop tattoo on his face, as well as a tattoo on his arm. This detail allowed the detectives to match these distinctive features with registered criminals. Detectives quickly identified a 31-year-old man named Jack Jones, who had the tattoos described by Lacey. Jack was well known to the local police for multiple robbery charges, but investigators did not suspect that he was responsible for much more serious crimes. The police quickly discovered Jack Jones's last known residence and went to apprehend him, expecting that he might already be on the run. To their surprise, Jack personally opened the door, did not seem alarmed at all. He was immediately brought to the station for questioning. While being taken to the department, detectives contemplated what tactics to employ to get the criminal to talk. To their surprise, no tricks were needed. As soon as Jack was asked about Mary and Lacey, he calmly began to recount what had happened. He stated that he had seen Mary standing in her office early that same day while he was driving past. As soon as it happened, he decided that he wanted to kill her because he found her incredibly beautiful. He returned later, knowing that the office closed around 4 p.m., when there should have been no one there. However, he saw a girl there but did not retreat. He tied up Lacey in the room because he was not interested in her. His goal from the very beginning was Mary. He bound her hands behind her back, placed her on the floor, abused her, and then cut a cord from the kettle, wrapped it around her neck, and began to strangle her. According to Jack Jones, this murder was an act of revenge for the abuse of his wife, as her attacker remained unpunished. The investigation revealed that Jack's wife did report the crime to the police, but later she retracted her statement against the abuser, leading to his release. Jack insisted that his wife was indeed abused, but why Mary had to pay for it remained a mystery. On the evening of June 7, 1995, Jack Jones was arrested for the abuse and murder of Mary. He was also charged with the attempted murder of Lacey. When the Phillips family was informed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, as no one could be sure that the killer wouldn't come back to eliminate the only witness. However, their fight was just beginning, as Jack still had to be brought to justice in court. Thanks to his confession, there should not be any problems. Lacey did not want to attend the hearings to avoid further trauma, but the existing evidence against him was enough to send him to prison. The trial began in April of 1996. By that time, law enforcement officials had carefully reviewed all the evidence against Jack. It was decided to show in court a recording of Lacey's account, made on a dictaphone while she was recovering from her injuries in the hospital. She quickly recovered physically, but psychologically she was broken. However, even in such a state, she wanted justice. The defense attorney tried to refute her statement, but the jury did not believe him. The defendant himself pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that he was not himself during the attack on the mother and daughter because he was treating his bipolar disorder with illegal drugs. His arguments about a difficult childhood were also unconvincing. Ultimately, the jury found Jack Jones guilty on all counts. For the murder of Mary Phillips, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. For the brutal beating of Lacey, he received a life sentence along with an additional 30 years and a fine of $15,000 for the attempted murder of Lacey. But this was not the end of Jack's criminal story. While on death row, he confessed to another murder, that of 32-year-old Lori Barrett. This incident occurred during her 5-day vacation in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where she planned to visit friends. Because she arrived late, she didn't want to bother her friend's family and decided to stay at a hotel instead. That evening, Barrett went to a local bar to relax after her trip. There, she met a young man with several tattoos. According to several witnesses who spoke to the police, Barrett was seen drinking with the stranger until about 2 a.m. in the hotel patio. After that, they went up in the elevator together, presumably to her room. The next day, she failed to show up for a planned barbecue with her friend. Later, a cleaning lady went to her room and found her body, which had been abused and strangled. Jack Jones confessed to this murder in 2005, claiming that he liked Barrett right away, and they spent the whole evening together before going up to her room. However, the details of what happened next and the reason for the attack remain unknown, as Jack refused to disclose them. For the trial related to this case, he was extradited to Florida and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, after which he was returned to Arkansas to await execution. Interestingly, Jack Jones could have been caught and convicted of this crime while it was still being committed. A composite sketch was created based on witness statements and footage from the hotel's security cameras. His sister identified him after seeing the sketch in a newspaper and showed it to their father, who insisted that she never talk about the event or show Jack's image to anyone else. She complied, remaining silent. Jack's father then put him on a bus and sent him to Arkansas to prevent anyone from recognizing him based on the composite sketch. Unfortunately, it cost Mary Phillips her life. When Jack's family was questioned about the story, They admitted that they knew their son had met with Barrett before the attack but did not believe that Jack could be involved in such a brutal crime. Consequently, the father decided not to contact the police. They described Jack as a very complex person who grew increasingly gloomy and cruel with age, taking out his anger not only on his siblings but also on his parents. However, they justified his behavior until the last moment, believing he could be loving and gentle. They did not think he was capable of murder. On April 24, 2017, 52-year-old Jack Jones was executed for the murder of Mary Phillips at the Cummins unit, along with abuser-murderer Marcel Williams, marking the first double execution in the country in 17 years. Jones and Williams were 2 of 4 inmates executed in Arkansas in April 2017, the other 2 being convicted murderers Liddell Lee and Kenneth Williams. Jones's last meal consisted of fried chicken, fries with tartar sauce, beef jerky, 3 candy bars, a chocolate milkshake, and juice. Lacey, now grown, was present at the execution. When Jack was given his last words, he turned to the victim's daughter, tenderly called her by name, and claimed that he had perceived her as his daughter all his life. Naturally, this only caused her disgust and anger. After the execution, it was revealed that Jack Jones was involved in another murder. Just before his execution, he gave his sister a letter he had written in 2006, with instructions to open it a year after his execution. She respected his request. When she finally opened the letter from her brother, she read a terrible confession. On May 2, 1983, 20-year-old Regina Harrison left her house in the evening to ride her bike. At that time, 19-year-old Jack Jones was riding his bike towards the beach. He meets Regina, who catches his eye, and secretly follows her to a deserted street, where he attacks, abuses, and kills her. They began to search for her that same evening after Regina did not return home at the appointed time. The next day, her body was found in a nearby park with signs of abuse and strangulation, which became the cause of death. During the investigation of this crime, detectives found a witness who identified the criminal as Ronald Stewart, who was passing by the park at the approximate time of the murder. In January of 1985, Ronald pleaded guilty and was then sentenced to 50 years in prison. He died behind bars of cancer in 2008. It later turned out that the only reason an innocent man took the blame was that Ronald Stewart had already committed a series of abuses of other girls. He had been convicted of those crimes and was now afraid of the death penalty, so he made a deal with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Ronald never denied his guilt during his lifetime, but DNA testing later showed that he was not guilty of Regina's murder. After Jack Jones' sister, Lynn, went to the police and handed over the letter confessing to the murder, DNA testing was conducted, and in February 2019, his words were officially confirmed: Jack was behind Regina's murder. Before the execution, he lost one of his legs due to diabetes. He stated that he was ready to die, and it remains unknown why he confessed to the murders of Mary and Barrett but did not do the same regarding Regina Harrison until he only mentioned it in a letter to his sister. After the execution, it became official that Jack had killed at least 3 young women. Law enforcement officials now believe that he could have been involved in more brutal crimes. Mary's widower, after Jack's death, spoke out against people who expressed support for the criminal. There were supporters of the killer who believed that he deserved a lighter sentence and demanded that the execution be cancelled. However, James said that he did not believe they would have maintained such a loyal attitude towards the criminal if he had killed their loved ones. Lacey, after talking to journalists, said that she could finally move on with her life. Justice had finally prevailed, and this dangerous criminal would no longer be able to harm anyone. However, even despite the execution, she believed that she would never be able to completely free herself from the consequences of the horror she had endured.
In October 1975, the murder of 15-year-old Martha Elizabeth Moxley shocked the town of Greenwich, Connecticut. Her body was found brutally beaten with a golf club, which was traced back to the home of a well-known family with political ties. This tragic event caused years of anguish for the Moxley family as they sought justice for their daughter's death. Let's go back in time. The Moxley family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, hoping to find a safe environment for their children, John and Martha. Their parents allowed them to explore the town freely, trusting in their safety. Martha was a remarkable teenager known for her beauty and intelligence. She had a vibrant personality and a close bond with her brother. Throughout her childhood, Martha showed impressive intellect. Her love for reading and writing reflected her passion for knowledge. Martha was well liked by her peers because of her outstanding qualities. Her lively and friendly nature helped her make many friends. She often found herself at the center of social gatherings. After the Moxley family moved to their new home in Greenwich, Martha continued to excel in school. Her commitment to her studies showed through her excellent grades and achievements. She had a natural gift for critical thinking and problem solving, distinguishing her from her classmates. Martha's aspirations went beyond academics. She wanted to impact the world through her writing. Her love for storytelling and her talent for expressing ideas clearly made her a strong candidate for a journalism career. October 30th was recognized as Mischief Night in Greenwich. During this tradition, children and teens engaged in playful mischief, often causing minor disturbances in their neighborhoods. The night typically involved activities like vandalism, property damage, and pranks. Eager to join in the fun, Martha Moxley spent the evening playing toilet papering over houses with her friends. It was a joyful night filled with laughter and innocent entertainment among the teenagers. Among the partygoers was 17-year-old Thomas Skakel, the nephew of Ethel Kennedy, who is the widow of former U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The Kennedy family was one of the most powerful and well-known political families in the United States from the 1960s to the early 1990s. Their name became closely associated with American politics, impacting all areas of society. President John F. Kennedy was viewed as a symbol of youthful energy and change, captivating the nation with his charisma. His administration made important advances in space exploration, civil rights, and foreign policy. After John's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy took on the role of leader for the family's political ambitions, known for his commitment to social justice and strong support for the civil rights movement. Robert's assassination added to the sorrow of the already mourning Kennedy family. However, their involvement in various scandals and controversies has damaged their reputation and overshadowed their political legacy. Sources indicate that Martha Moxley and Thomas Skakel were flirting and even kissing on the night she disappeared. The last sighting of Martha was around 9:30 p.m. when she was with Thomas near the pool in his backyard. After that, no one knew where she was until a shocking discovery was made the next morning, which stunned the entire community. On October 31st, the day after Mischief Night, Martha Moxley's body was discovered under a tree in her yard. Her clothing and underwear were pulled down to her ankles, but the medical examiner found no signs of abuse assault. Nearby, pieces of a 6-iron golf club were located, which became a key piece of evidence in understanding the circumstances surrounding Martha's death. The chief medical examiner of Connecticut performed an autopsy on Martha. His findings revealed disturbing details. Martha had multiple scalp lacerations, skull fractures, and injuries to her brain. The absence of signs of a struggle led the medical examiner to determine that Martha had been violently assaulted. The medical examiner determined that the weapon that caused her injuries and death was a 6-iron golf club, which matched evidence collected at the scene. The severity of her injuries and the strong evidence linking the golf club to the murder confirmed that her death was neither an accident nor an end to her own life. They classified Martha's death as a homicide. Witnesses reported seeing Martha with Thomas Skakel on the night she died, raising suspicions and directing detectives focused towards the Skakel family. An investigation later found that the golf club used to kill Martha originated from the Skakel home, which further increased doubts about the involvement of the two Skakel brothers. Although the investigation made initial progress, it soon stalled due to interference from the Skakel family. They interfered with the investigation right from the beginning. One significant way they obstructed progress was by blocking the police from accessing their son's school medical records. These records could have shed light on Thomas Skakel's behavior and any health issues he might have had at the time of the crime. By denying investigators this information, the Skakel family hindered the exploration of potential motives. Thomas's father took further actions to impede the investigation. He discouraged witnesses from stepping forward or sharing what they knew about the crime, making it challenging for investigators to gather first-hand testimonies. This interference also significantly hampered the progress of the investigation. When news of Martha's murder emerged, Thomas and Michael Skakel, grandsons of Robert F. Kennedy, became targets of intense media scrutiny. Reporters and the public were eager to uncover any potential involvement or connections to Martha's death. As members of the Kennedy family, the brothers faced overwhelming speculation. Throughout the investigation, Thomas and Michael maintained their innocence, asserting that they had no involvement in Martha's murder. They consistently denied being at the party where she was killed and claimed ignorance about the circumstances of her death. Their repeated denials attracted even more media attention and public interest in the case. However, despite the extensive coverage, there was no solid evidence linking the brothers to Martha's murder. The murder of Martha Moxley attracted worldwide attention because of the involvement of the Kennedy family. Initially, attention turned to Kenneth Littleton, who was hired as a tutor by the Skakel family just hours before Martha's murder. Littleton was a live-in tutor for the Skakel brothers, and since he was present near the crime scene, he was suspected of being an accomplice. His interactions with the brothers were examined, and some believed he might have influenced them to commit the crime. As time passed, the testimonies from Thomas and Michael Skakel about that night began to change. Witnesses reported that Michael had confessed to killing Martha with a golf club. Additionally, a former classmate of Michael claimed he received preferential treatment and boasted about escaping punishment for the murder because of his ties to the Kennedy family. Many books have been written about the Moxley murder in an effort to uncover the truth about her death. One notable book is A Season in Purgatory by acclaimed author Dominic Dunn, which focuses on the Moxley murder case. Dunn conducted thorough research to provide a detailed account of the events leading up to Martha's death. Another significant book, Murder in Greenwich by Mark Furman, a former police detective known, presents his perspective on the investigation and various theories surrounding the case. These books examine different theories proposed by investigators and advocates for justice for Martha. Despite significant media and public interest, the case remained unsolved, which caused frustration for both investigators and the public. The tragic death of Martha Moxley shocked the community and led to a lengthy investigation that lasted nearly 2 decades. In 1998, a jury was assembled to examine the circumstances of her murder. After a thorough inquiry lasting almost 2 years, there was enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel with the crime. In January 2000, police issued an arrest warrant for Michael, who then turned himself in. He was soon released on bail after posting a $500,000 bond. On March 14, 2000, Michael was arraigned in juvenile court. Although he was 15 years old when Martha was murdered, the judge decided to try him as an adult. Michael Skakel's trial began on May 7, 2002, in Norwalk, Connecticut. Prosecutors built a strong case by presenting evidence linking him to the crime and highlighting inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense maintained that Michael was innocent, arguing he was at a cousin's house when the murder occurred. The murder trial of Martha Moxley received extensive media coverage, drawing attention from both national outlets and the local community. Many people were invested in the case, hoping for justice for the victim. During the trial, the prosecution introduced a book proposal that suggested his involvement in the crime. In this proposal, Michael admitted to engaging in inappropriate behavior while in a tree on the night of the murder. Although he acknowledged being at the crime scene, he did not confess to directly harming Martha. Ultimately, on June 7, 2002, Michael Skakel was convicted of Moxley's murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He was assigned to Garner Correctional Facility in Newtown, Connecticut. Reactions to the verdict were mixed, with some individuals feeling satisfied and others raising concerns. Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, presenting several arguments. One of his main points was that the trial should have occurred in juvenile court instead of superior court, as he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He contended that his age should have prevented him from being charged as an adult. Furthermore, Skakel claimed that the prosecution committed misconduct by not disclosing crucial evidence that could have exonerated him, which he argued violated his due process rights and compromised the fairness of his trial. Nevertheless, In January 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed his claims and upheld his conviction. In 2007, Michael Skakel hired a new attorney and requested a retrial in Connecticut court, proposing a new theory regarding Martha Moxley's murder. His defense team presented evidence implying that Gitano Tony Bryant, cousin of Los Angeles Lakers player Kobe Bryant and former classmate of Michael at Brunswick Private School in Greenwich. In an August 2003 videotaped interview with Vito Colucci, a private investigator hired by Michael, Bryant said that on the night of Moxley's murder, one of his friends had tried to molest her. Bryant said he had not come forward because his mother had warned him that, as a black man, he would be framed for the unsolved murder. A 2-week hearing in April 2007 allowed this oral evidence to be presented, along with other matters. In September 2007, Michael's attorneys filed a motion, based in part on Bryant's complaints, for a new trial. Official prosecutors responded that Bryant may have made up the story to sell a drama about the case. During this period, Michael's defense team appointed several full-time investigators to examine case details, hoping to uncover new evidence that would prove his innocence. Unfortunately, their efforts were hindered when a Supreme Court judge rejected Michael's request for a new trial, stating that Bryant's testimony lacked credibility and that there was no evidence of misconduct by the prosecutors during Michael's initial trial. Michael's attorneys once again appealed this ruling to the Connecticut Supreme Court. In 2009, a panel of 5 judges listened to the appeal, but a year later, on April 12, 2010, they ruled 4-1 against Michael. Despite these challenges, Michael and his legal team remained determined to secure his freedom. In January 2012, they requested a sentence reduction, arguing that he had been an exemplary prisoner and warranted leniency. However, this request was denied, and Michael's sentence continued to stand. In 2013, Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, claiming that his trial attorney, Michael Sherman, had not provided effective representation. During the hearing, Michael Skakel accused Sherman of lacking interest in his defense and being more focused on collecting fees to resolve his financial issues. This raised serious doubts about the fairness of his trial and the potential for a wrongful conviction. As a result, Michael was granted a new trial after it was determined that Sherman had not adequately defended him during his 2002 trial. On November 21, 2013, Michael Skakel was released on $1.2 million bail with other conditions. He must be monitored with a GPS device, have no contact with the Moxley family, must be checked in periodically by phone, and will not be allowed to leave the state of Connecticut unless permission is granted, although he later moved to Westchester County, New York. In December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Michael's murder conviction in a 4-3 majority decision, writing that his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors and that his legal representation was adequate. In January 2018, prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke Michael's bail and return him to prison to continue serving his sentence. However, on May 4, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated Skakel's conviction and ordered a new trial. The court ruled that Sherman had provided ineffective assistance when he failed to contact an alibi witness named by Michael and that Michael had therefore been deprived of a fair trial. State prosecutors in Stamford have the right to seek a new trial for Michael. This ruling surprised many in the legal community and rekindled questions about the true circumstances of the crime. Despite the possibility of a new trial, in October 2020, the chief state attorney informed the Supreme Court that they would not retry Michael Skakel for Martha's murder. This decision came after a thorough review of the evidence. This decision marked the end of a lengthy legal battle that spanned decades and left many unanswered questions about the murder of Martha Moxley. In 2023, Michael Skakel filed lawsuits against the police investigator in Greenwich. The lawsuits alleged malicious prosecution and violations of constitutional rights. According to Michael's attorney, the fact that Michael spent over 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit meant he could never be compensated for that lost time. Michael's lawsuits claimed that the lead investigator did not perform their duties properly, acted unethically, and intimidated witnesses during interviews, alleged that the investigator threatened witnesses to make them give false statements. These accusations raised significant concerns about the integrity of the investigation and the validity of Michael Skakel's conviction. Furthermore, The lawsuits argue that the investigator sought to profit from Michael's case, indicating that they were working on a book and film about Michael's supposed involvement in Martha's murder while continuing the investigation. Martha's brother, John, was shocked by the news of Michael's freedom and struggles to grasp the reasoning behind the court's decision. He is convinced that Michael Skakel is guilty and insists that just because Michael is free, it doesn't mean he is innocent. Instead, it reflects the judge's decisions and legal technicalities. In John's view, Michael Skakel killed his sister, a belief he holds firmly. Even though Michael is no longer in prison, John believes he will always be mentally imprisoned, tormented by his actions for the rest of his life. The Oxygen created a powerful documentary exploring the details of Martha Moxley's murder. The Moxley family chose to be part of the documentary to honor Martha and promote the truth about her case. Over the years, many theories have emerged regarding Martha Moxley's death. One of the key suspects is Michael Skakel. Several motives have been suggested for his alleged involvement, including jealousy and anger. Martha had a close friendship with Michael's brother, Thomas Skakel, which might have fueled Michael's resentment towards her. It has also been speculated that Michael may have seen a meeting between Martha and Thomas that triggered feelings of insecurity. Another suspect is Thomas Skakel himself. One theory proposes that he may have killed Martha out of jealousy or rage, especially since she reportedly rejected his advances. Additionally, their family tutor, Kenneth Littleton, has been considered a possible suspect. Others believe that her murderer was simply someone who happened to be passing by. Proponents of these theories argue that Michael Skakel was an easy target and that the true murderer has not yet been caught. Shannon Graves was born on November 4, 1988, in Ohio, USA. She was raised by her mother, a single mother. Everything changed when her mother met Ronnie DePaul, who became a father figure in her life. Ronnie treats her like his own daughter, and she quickly takes a liking to him. She was known for her kind heart and loving nature. In 2016, Shannon proudly earned her cosmetology license, marking a new beginning after a challenging childhood. Her friends affectionately called her Star, recognizing her free spirit, honesty, and selflessness. However, Shannon's compassionate nature sometimes led her to make poor choices in relationships. Following her mother's death, she struggled with substance abuse. Her close friends observed that she often fell for the wrong men, whether due to bad luck or her attraction to rebellious personalities. Despite these challenges, Shannon was determined to take control of her life. Her professional achievements filled her with hope for a brighter future. Unfortunately, Shannon's intuition was wrong when she became involved with Arturo Novoa. He is of Puerto Rican descent, charming and passionate about music, but he is also very secretive about his life. This secrecy likely stemmed from his lengthy criminal history, which began in 2004 with arrests for assault and property damage. A few months later, he faced charges of escaping from prison and obstructing public service. In 2006, he was charged with felony fleeing after a police chase, followed by aggravated arson charges. After serving his prison term, he was arrested again for trespassing in 2008 after being evicted from his residence. In 2010, he faced additional charges related to weapons and unlawful entry. Court records indicate that he was a man addicted to criminal activity and made a living by illegal means. When Shannon and Arturo began dating in the summer of 2016, everything seemed to be going well. She introduced him to her family and started spending more time at his home. That same year, she got a puppy, which brought her joy and companionship. During the holiday season, she celebrated with her family, enjoying food, laughter, and gift exchanges. This gathering would unknowingly be the last time the family would be together. 2 months later, while with Arturo, Shannon briefly encountered her sister, Debbie DePaul. They discussed Debbie's upcoming birthday in March, for which Shannon was already making plans. However, when the day came, she did not attend, an unusual absence. Initially, her family thought she was just busy and would arrive later, but she never came. Alarmingly, she did not call or send a message, not even to wish Debbie a happy birthday. When she also missed the Easter gathering the following month, concern grew. As time passed, her family's anxiety increased. After calling and texting several times without receiving a response, Ronnie attempted to contact Arturo. He claimed that he and Shannon had broken up and that she had moved to Cleveland with someone else. However, when Ronnie and Debbie tried to contact her directly, they were unsuccessful. Determined to find her, they went to her apartment, but found no clues. Her car and phone were there, but her beloved dog was missing. Around this time, Arturo was arrested on charges related to banned substances. In the following weeks, Shannon's family was engulfed in fear and uncertainty. In June, Debbie officially reported her as a missing person to the police. In their report, family members acknowledged Shannon's past struggles with addiction but highlighted that she had never gone this long without contacting them. Authorities requested anyone with information to come forward while they searched hospitals and jails, but there was still no trace of Shannon. Investigators found tracking her whereabouts to be extremely challenging, especially since she had been missing for months. They filed a request for her phone records and began looking into her personal life, noting that she often spent long periods of time with her boyfriend, Arturo, before her disappearance. The police subsequently interviewed Arturo. He recounted the same story he had told Ronnie, adding complexity to the case. Without a clear timeline for Shannon's disappearance, they could not confirm Arturo's alibi. Additionally, there was no evidence of a new boyfriend with whom Shannon had supposedly moved in. As suspicions rose, detectives learned about an ex-boyfriend named John, and considering this lead, they decided to investigate him further. John, a business owner, had a criminal past involving trafficking of banned substances. His incarceration had led to his breakup with Shannon, as her friends remembered how distressed she was upon learning of his conviction. Complicating matters, John had been released from prison shortly before Shannon was reported missing. When police found and interviewed him, he claimed he hadn't seen her since February, when she mentioned getting back together with Arturo. His statement implied that her relationship with Arturo may not have been as perfect as it seemed. Still, John admitted that he had lingering feelings for her at the time of their last conversation. With two potential suspects but no clear evidence, police were having a hard time getting their case off the ground. When Shannon's phone records were finally released, investigators hoped to glean vital information. Unfortunately, these records only confirmed that she had gone to work as usual in late February before her phone was suddenly turned off. The number had since been reassigned to someone else, and around that same time, all activity on her credit cards also came to a halt. The investigators had no idea that the answer to the case was about to emerge, but in the most frightening way. On July 30th, a man from Youngstown called 911 to report a shocking discovery. He told the operator that he had found human remains inside black garbage bags, and most disturbingly, the head was missing. Upon receiving the signal, rescue workers notified the police, who quickly arrived at the home of the caller, Kenny Eschenbaugh, and his wife, Jill. While forensic experts investigated the remains, Kenny and Jill were brought in for questioning. According to their testimony, the freezer containing the body parts belonged to a friend. A week prior, this friend had asked Kenny and Jill to store it in their basement, claiming it was filled with meat he didn't want to spoil. On July 29th, Jill decided to cook spaghetti and meatballs for dinner and thought she could use some meat from the freezer, planning to replace it later. However, when she approached the freezer, she found it locked. Assuming their friend was just being eccentric, she used a screwdriver to pry it open. To her horror, instead of meat, she found bags filled with what turned out to be human remains. Feeling nauseated, she quickly shut the freezer and called for Kenny. Together, they cautiously opened one of the bags and discovered a human foot. Since Kenny and Jill's stories matched perfectly when questioned separately, they were quickly ruled out as suspects. Investigators then turned their attention to the friend who had left the freezer in their home, named Anthony Gonzalez. Kenny explained that he had met Anthony 4 years earlier through a mutual friend, bonding over their shared interest in music. Although they hung out occasionally, Kenny found Anthony to be unpredictable and sometimes aggressive. Despite being cooperative, the identity of the victim remained a mystery until forensic experts discovered a scorpion tattoo on one of the feet, matching a tattoo belonging to Shannon, a woman who had recently disappeared. While more tests were planned, it increasingly appeared that the remains belonged to her. This left investigators with a concerning question: how and when was Shannon placed in the freezer? Shortly afterward, the lead prosecutor in Ohio held a press conference to discuss this chilling case, which was rapidly becoming one of the most disturbing in recent history. Although the medical examiner couldn't determine the cause of death without the victim's head, Shannon was positively identified through fingerprint analysis. Her family was heartbroken to learn the truth about their beloved daughter, discovering that her fate was far worse than they had ever imagined. Shannon's family and friends gathered in a local park for a candlelight vigil to remember her. Debbie, one of the attendees, told reporters that she believed Shannon has found peace. The vigil was intended to celebrate Shannon's life rather than to focus on sadness. Many people lit candles and released lanterns while wearing shirts with messages honoring Shannon. However, Shannon's family was visibly pained. Ronnie, too devastated to appear on camera, shared his indescribable grief, explaining that he loved Shannon as a daughter and sought justice for her. In the meantime, investigators ramped up the search for Anthony. They soon discovered that Anthony Gonzalez was just an alias. His real name matched the identity of someone they had already suspected, Arturo Novoa. Authorities learned that Arturo had been dating a woman named Katrina Layton, who moved into his house shortly after Shannon was last seen. Given Arturo's lengthy criminal history, the police acted quickly, arresting both him and Katrina and searching their home. The police found red stains on the walls, a knife, and a manual for the freezer where Shannon's remains were located. Kenny, who previously believed his friend's name was Anthony, was shocked to learn Arturo's true identity. He wasn't the only one confused. Arturo often used different names, possibly to conceal his past involving activities related to banned substances. During questioning, Arturo remained composed, repeatedly denying any connection to Shannon's death and claiming ignorance about her whereabouts. He also distanced himself from the freezer. Katrina supported his claims, but their story began to unravel when police discovered a key among her belongings that fit the freezer's lock, linking them to the crime and ensuring they remained in custody. As the investigation continued, Shannon's ex-boyfriend John played a crucial role in uncovering additional information. He spoke to Shannon's friends and learned about a bonfire attended by Arturo. A witness reported that Arturo used the fire to burn personal items and, when questioned, he claimed they were Shannon's clothes, which he burned as revenge for alleged infidelity. That night, he was with his friend Andrew Herman, and they both continued to burn clothing. Investigators later searched the bonfire site and found remnants, including a bracelet that belonged to Shannon. As the investigation progressed, authorities contacted a woman named Jamie, who knew Andrew and his wife, Michelle Eilenfeld. Jamie reveals that Arturo and Katrina were behind Shannon's murder, while Andrew helped handling the body of her body. Jamie stated that Katrina had harbored jealousy towards Shannon for a long time, and that Shannon felt the same way about her. The situation became more complicated when neighbors reported seeing Katrina walking Shannon's dog and using her credit card to make small purchases, suggesting that Katrina had taken over a part of her life. Amid these incidents, Ronnie passed away unexpectedly without witnessing justice. Debbie, overwhelmed with sorrow, sought therapy while caring for her younger brother and Shannon's cherished dog. Meanwhile, Andrew and Michelle were placed in pretrial detention. Authorities gathered a wealth of evidence that Michelle had threatened witnesses, interfered with the investigation, and covered up the crime. As the case went to the jury, the truth of what happened became clearer. On February 24, 2017, Arturo killed Shannon, likely with Katrina present. He later called Andrew to assist him in handling the body. They disposed of her head, stored other body parts in their freezer, and discarded some remains in an undisclosed location that authorities have yet to find. The prosecutor stated that Arturo was merely a small-time dealer of banned substances, acting out of jealousy over Shannon's finances. Katrina, on the other hand, wanted Shannon to keep her distance so she could pursue a relationship with Arturo. Facing the death penalty, the four defendants ultimately accepted plea deals. Arturo Novoa received a life sentence for murdering Shannon. Katrina Layton was sentenced to 18 years, Andrew Herman to 12 years, and Michelle Eilenfeld to 2 years. Arturo attempted to appeal his sentence, but it was upheld. To keep the memory of Shannon alive, Debbie created a social media page dedicated to her younger sister, where she frequently shares pictures of her pet dog. She frequently visits Shannon's grave, where she has established a special ritual. After cutting the grass, Debbie spray paints a large pink heart next to the headstone, which was Shannon's favorite color. In a local interview a few years later, Debbie recalled the devastating call she received about the partial discovery of Shannon's remains. Currently, the investigators who helped convict Arturo are still searching for the missing parts of Shannon's remains. Debbie remains hopeful that they will be found someday as she continues to honor her sister's memory through her dedicated online tribute.
Gregory Bohr was born on July 19, 1981, in the American village of Scotts, Kalamazoo County, Michigan. He was the firstborn of Sharon and Gys. They later had 2 more children, Chad and Troy. Gregory has a close relationship with his brother Chad, whom he takes good care of. Solidarity and strong friendship are what set this family apart. In high school, Gregory became interested in motors and technology, devoting all his free time to experiments, studying mechanical devices and machines. During this period, he met a girl whom he began to court. Their passionate romantic relationship ended in engagement. The marriage was registered, and on March 24, 1999. While still very young, they found out they were expecting a child, and then a daughter named Lily was born. The birth of Lily filled Gregory with new strength and inspiration. After receiving his high school diploma, Gregory searched for work and, fortunately, quickly found a position at a prestigious company specializing in the production of motorcycles. This aligned with his interests, but the experience he gained pushed him forward. Soon, he changed jobs to work in a company that produced auto parts, where he had the opportunity to develop his skills, demonstrate himself as a talented worker. However, not everything went smoothly in family life. Just like at work, only love remained. Amid the routine, the spouses forgot about the bright feelings that once connected their hearts. As a result, the tension in their relationship led to divorce. Little Lily stayed with her father, and Gregory took on this responsibility without hesitation since his daughter was the meaning of his existence. Gregory remained a bachelor until 2012 when he met Janelle. She was also from a farming background. At that time, she worked at the state post office and had previously been married. Both spouses faced difficulties in family life. Initially, these problems seemed insignificant, but over time, they worsened. Ultimately, Janelle accused her husband of violence and abuse, pointing out injuries in the eye area. The statement was accepted, and an investigation began, which led to an unexpected result. It turned out that she had harmed herself solely to accuse her husband of something he had not done. Upon meeting, Janelle and Gregory discovered that, in addition to mutual attraction, they shared common interests, the most significant of which was a love for firearms. Very soon, their trips to the shooting range became one of their favorite activities. They were happy, enjoying each other's company, and the age difference did not bother them at all. Gregory introduced his loved ones to Janelle and made plans for their future together. Nevertheless, as the relationship progressed, his relatives noticed some unpleasant changes. Gregory began to distance himself from his family, while Janelle made no effort to strengthen his ties with his loved ones. In 2012, without warning anyone and maintaining strict confidentiality, they got married in Las Vegas. Following that, they moved with Lily to a house on South 36th Street, Pavilion Township, near Scotts. The spacious basement allowed them to convert it into a room for storing collectible weapons and ammunition. Thanks to the large plot of land next to the house, they could train without going to the shooting range. That same year, their son Jason was born. For Gregory, family was the main priority, and he tried to spend as much time as possible with his children. He was especially proud of Lily as he watched her grow into a responsible and self-confident young girl. After a long time in the auto parts industry, Gregory felt the need for a change and moved to the pharmaceutical industry. However, his work schedule became completely different, with the added burden of night shifts. Meanwhile, Janelle still did not seek to communicate with her husband's family. Soon, she began to limit encounters for little Jason with his grandmothers and uncles. Additionally, her indifference to people dear to Gregory was evident. One could say that her entire life revolved around her husband. Obsessed with the idea of becoming the center of the universe for him, Janelle began to feel envy towards the love Gregory showed his eldest daughter. She stopped taking care of Lily and did everything to make the girl's life unbearable. Despite Gregory's attempts to maintain harmony in the family, the relationship between Janelle and Lily worsened with each passing day. On an April afternoon in 2014, Gregory's patience reached its limit, and he filed for divorce in court. He requested joint custody of Jason, but as expected, it was not easy to fight with Janelle. She appealed the divorce request, arguing that the marriage could still be saved until the legal aspects were resolved. Gregory moved into the basement of the house, surrounded by a variety of weapons collected over the years of marriage, and slept on a mattress. To his disappointment, the divorce turned into a complicated and lengthy process. On the evening of February 13, 2017, Gregory went to work, telling Lily that he loved her before leaving. The next morning, when his shift ended, he returned home, went down to the basement, and lay down to rest. Around noon, Janelle also came home and, taking advantage of her husband's deep sleep, attacked him with a .40 caliber pistol. Gregory died on the spot. No sooner had she pulled the trigger than she began a series of actions that, in her opinion, should have helped her avoid responsibility. In particular, she attacked herself in the arm and then called 911 to report what had happened in their home. The Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office responded immediately. When a group of officers arrived on the scene, Janelle was already standing outside, clutching her bloody arm. Officer Warren Meisner was among the first to arrive. Along with other police officers, he entered the house and took several photographs. After that, both Janelle and Warren were taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital. During the trip, she told Warren what had happened. According to her, when she came home on her lunch break, she decided to talk to Gregory again about the upcoming divorce. Janelle begged Gregory to reconsider his decision. She then claimed that her lawyer was already aware of Gregory's physical and emotional abuse toward her and Jason. Losing his temper, her husband grabbed his gun and fired several times. When Janelle finished her story, Sergeant Warren looked at her thoughtfully, noticing that she had been speaking with striking calmness. The next day, while in the hospital, Janelle testified again, providing more details. This time, she was listened to not only by the warden but also by another officer. Janelle clarified that upon returning home, she immediately began to wash clothes and then went down to the basement to wake up Gregory. In this new version of her story, she added that during their argument, at one point, he turned toward the rack, took a .45 caliber weapon from the shelf, and fired 2 or 3 attacks into the room without a specific target. Janelle decided that he had finally let loose all his rage and felt relief. However, Gregory pulled out a second weapon, looked into her eyes, and at that same moment, Janelle felt a strong blow to the chest. She fell, hit her head, and lost consciousness. When she came to, she saw Gregory lying lifeless, covered with a blanket, with a weapon in his right hand. Janelle also told the agents about the difficult divorce process and reinforced her story with lies, claiming that Gregory had threatened her and hinted that he would take his own life. Initially, this version of events seemed quite logical for the damage, but one of her gestures made him doubt her credibility. Later, Warren told his colleague that he felt she was trying with all her might to convince him of the truth of her story. Thinking more calmly about what had happened, Warren noticed that, as an experienced shooter and owner of such a number of weapons, Gregory could not have missed, especially since his wife was just a few meters away from him. The relatives of Gregory also pondered this oddity. Gregory's daughter Lily was sure that her father could not harm another person and would not abandon her and her younger brother. Meanwhile, a medical examination of Janelle revealed no injury, despite her claims of a blow and subsequent loss of consciousness. Instead, traces of gunpowder were found on her hands, which added to this murky story. Forensic pathologist Brandy Shattuck performed an autopsy on Gregory's body and concluded that the cause of death was a bullet wound to the head, and the injury was certainly inflicted by another person. Having received these results, the investigators decided to return to the crime scene. The task of reconstructing the sequence of events was assigned to Sergeant James Dunlop and a team of technicians from the forensic lab. Armed with their tools, including laser rangefinders and special spray for measuring the trajectory of projectiles, they entered the basement. Considering all the details collected up to this point, James was especially intrigued by the fact that Gregory was right-handed and the bullet entry wound was on the left side of his face. This indicated that the gun had been fired from a distance of approximately 45 centimeters. Therefore, for James, the hypothesis that Gregory had aimed at himself was rejected. If he had used his left hand, he would not have been able to hold the gun in the normal way to achieve the required angle and distance. Then another inconsistency in Janelle's story emerged. She claimed that her husband was on the bed, but the gun was found at a considerable distance from his body. The next step in the investigation was to measure the angles of the bullet trajectories. Only 2 of the 4 bullets found could be accurately traced based on this data. The experts concluded that Gregory's fatal wound was caused by a .40 caliber weapon, with the bullet remaining in his head. The second bullet pierced part of the door and hit one of the walls, raising a cloud of dust that spread in small particles throughout the room. While examining Gregory's body, investigators found these particles on his eyelashes, neck, and hair. In addition, they were above the blood at the scene, indicating that this shot was fired after Gregory's death. Lastly, James could determine that both Janelle and her husband had roughly the same amount of gunpowder residue on their hands. It was easy to conclude that one of them had the opportunity to wash their hands and attempted to eliminate the evidence. Of course, it was not the victim. Janelle became the prime suspect, and Officer Warren faced many questions and contradictions in this difficult situation. Studying Janelle's past, he found her ex-husband, whom he called to the station to learn about their life together and the alleged assaults. The ex-husband provided a detailed description of the incidents related to the domestic violence complaint from Janelle. Looking into the alleged violence by Gregory towards his wife and son, investigators found no evidence to support Janelle's statement. At that moment, they felt that the pieces of the puzzle were finally beginning to come together to form a whole. The case against the suspect was now only a matter of time before she was called in for further questioning. However, she stated that her lawyer had advised her not to say anything without his presence. After completing the investigation on March 1, 2017, the Sheriff's Department presented the prosecutor's office and filed a motion to charge Janelle with murder and unlawful use of a firearm. After the appropriate review and approval, on the same day, Janelle was arrested and taken to the Kalamazoo County Jail. On March 2, 2017, the trial was broadcast live from the jail and presided over by District Judge Vincent C. Westra. The attorney presented her arguments for Janelle's release on bail, arguing for the need to allow her to see her young son. However, Judge Westra denied the request. On June 9, 2017, Janelle received a summons to appear in court issued. Westra judge decided to initiate criminal proceedings, which greatly pleased Gregory's family. The relatives of Janelle felt that they were one step closer to a fair outcome, but they understood that they would have to be patient because the trial had just begun. Unexpectedly for everyone, Janelle agreed to confess to her guilt, which excluded the option of life imprisonment. However, Gregory's relatives were, of course, dissatisfied. On January 11, 2018, 44-year-old Janelle Bohr took the blame for the murder of her 35-year-old husband, Gregory Bohr. Later, on February 12, 2018, a sentencing hearing. In court, Chad spoke about how Janelle deprived her dearest beloved son of his brother. He wished for Janelle to receive the deserved punishment and took the opportunity to talk about the wonderful spiritual qualities of his brother, who was a caring father. Chad said his brother won't be able to see his children graduate from high school, teach his son to ride a bike or walk his daughter down the aisle on her wedding day. Janelle Bohr's defense attorney, Sarisa Montague, said she did not believe her client was a bad person. She said Janelle struggled a lot with why the murder happened, her role in it, and the consequences. Montague said if Janelle had truly considered the consequences of her actions, she would not have committed the crime. Now, the family has lost a son and a brother and a boy without a mother and father, she said. Janelle herself also addressed Judge and asked for forgiveness for what she had done, noting that she deserved serious punishment. The court sentenced her to a term of 17 to 19 years. Jason was subsequently adopted by his uncle Chad and his wife. When Janelle gets out of prison, her son will be 22 years old. Lily will never forget the last words of her dad, who said that he loved her. He will always live in the girl's memory and, watching over her from heaven, will become an eternal guardian angel for his children. Sandra Birchmore was born on May 13, 1997, in Stoughton, Massachusetts. Her childhood was difficult, forcing her to mature early. Her mother, Denise, faced serious health problems, which led to financial hardship for the family. Her father was absent, providing neither emotional nor financial support, which left her mother as the sole breadwinner. Despite the challenging circumstances, Sandra received support from her mother's long-term partner and her grandmother, Grace, who helped care for Denise as her health declined. In a family where survival often took precedence over stability, Sandra learned resilience and responsibility at a very young age. From an early age, Sandra was inspired by public service, showing great respect for authority figures, especially police officers and military personnel. This admiration stemmed from her family background, as many of her maternal relatives had served in law enforcement or the armed forces. Her interest in police work began at the age of 8 when she joined a program called Respect. This initiative aimed to help children develop civic responsibility and communication skills, while fostering positive relationships with law enforcement. It was here that Sandra's dream of becoming a police officer first emerged. Eager to pursue this goal, she got involved with the Police Explorers program at the age of 12. This program introduced young people to law enforcement, providing training in safety protocols, emergency response, and police procedures. From 2010 to 2016, Sandra committed herself to the program, taking each lesson seriously and striving to improve her skills. Friends and mentors were impressed by her dedication, recognizing that this was more than just an extracurricular activity, it was the foundation for her future. However, life had unexpected turns ahead. In 2016, when Sandra was 19, tragedy struck with the passing of her mother, Denise. This loss left her heartbroken. Although her aunt offered support, the grief was overwhelming. This difficult time coincided with the end of her participation in the Police Explorers program, creating a challenging crossroads for her. The career in law enforcement she had once dreamed of seemed to drift away as she struggled to regain her footing. After graduating high school, Sandra decided to pursue a new path by enrolling in college prep courses with the intention of studying nursing. While she shifted her focus, she never completely let go of her passion for police work and maintained connections with her peers from the Explorers program. However, the struggles she faced during her childhood impacted her in ways she didn't fully understand. The loss of her mother and the absence of a strong father figure left her seeking guidance and validation from authority figures, a vulnerability that would significantly shape her future. In 2020, Sandra moved to Canton, a town in Norfolk County, Massachusetts, with a population of about 25,000, in search of a new beginning. Canton was known for its safety and friendliness, making it an attractive place for her to settle down. She found a job as a teacher's assistant at Sharon Public School, where she worked with students who had special needs. Although this role was not her ultimate career aspiration, she viewed it as a stepping stone toward a better future. Her experience caring for her mother had fostered a strong desire to help others, and she aimed to build a career that would allow her to make a difference. Colleagues regarded Sandra as outgoing and friendly, though her emotional openness sometimes crossed boundaries, making others uncomfortable. Despite her tendency to overshare personal information, her dedication to her students is evident. She genuinely cares and invests a great deal of effort into her work. Although she lacks experience, her warmth and ability to connect with others endear her to many. However, this also renders her vulnerable to those who might take advantage of her trust. Sandra views her time at Sharon Public Schools as a temporary phase leading to something more meaningful. She had goals and dreams for a purposeful future. However, Her eagerness to connect with others and her tendency to trust without question would ultimately lead her into a dangerous situation with severe consequences. Sandra met Matthew Farwell for the first time in 2010 when she was 13 years old. At the time, she participated in the Police Explorers program, which sparked her interest in law enforcement. Matthew, a 27-year-old instructor in the program, quickly became a mentor to her. Initially, their interactions were limited to activities within the program, but as time went on, their communication extended beyond official meetings. By the time Sandra turned 15, Matthew started sending her personal messages. He used subtle psychological tactics to make her feel dependent on him. What had begun as guidance turned into manipulation, and over the years, their relationship developed into an unhealthy dynamic. Matthew's control over Sandra grew as he inserted himself into all areas of her life, becoming extremely possessive. He demanded to know her whereabouts at all times and insisted that she keep him updated on her acquaintances. His need for control extended to technology, which he used to track her movements, further restricting her independence. As his jealousy increased, so did his volatility. His once loving demeanor could quickly turn aggressive, filled with veiled threats. Whenever Sandra tried to assert herself, he perceived any opposition as a betrayal. Despite the toxic nature of their relationship, Sandra remained hopeful for improvement. She rationalized his behavior, convinced herself that he cared for her, and held on to the belief that the man who initially seemed protective would not become her greatest source of fear. By early 2021, Sandra was preparing for a significant life change. She was expecting a baby. Despite facing many challenges, she looked forward to the future with hope. Her apartment was filled with baby items she carefully selected, from tiny clothes to essential supplies. Even though money was tight, she was determined to celebrate her baby's arrival and planned a baby shower to share this special moment with her loved ones. Her excitement was evident, and everyone could see how invested she was in becoming a mother. She had even arranged for a newborn photography session to capture those precious early days of her child's life. However, beneath her cheerful exterior, she was struggling inside. Her relationship with Matthew was a significant source of stress. Although he was still part of her life, he often caused more anxiety than support. In the days leading up to the crisis, Matthew's behavior became increasingly unpredictable. He came to Sandra's apartment, pretending to help her prepare for the baby, but soon asked for access to her home, requesting both a key and the door code for emergencies. Once inside, he seemed unusually focused on her bedroom closet, paying more attention to it than was normal. After his visit, Sandra confided in a friend about Matthew's strange behavior but attempted to rationalize it, convincing herself that his actions were driven by concern. This was the last time she expressed any doubts about him. On February 4, 2021, alarm bells rang at Sharon Public School when Sandra didn't show up for work and failed to respond to calls. Although a recent snowstorm had caused disruptions in the city, her absence felt out of character. After several days without news, her co-workers contacted the authorities. Officers were dispatched for a welfare check at her apartment. They knocked and rang the doorbell multiple times, but no one answered. The distinctive smell of decomposition coming from inside raised immediate concern. The officers broke into the apartment and found Sandra in her bedroom. It was clear she had been dead for several days. At first glance, there were no signs of struggle, the furniture was undisturbed, and the overall messiness of the apartment matched her typical living conditions. However, when her family later entered the apartment, they noticed unsettling details. A load of freshly washed but wet laundry sat in the washing machine, indicating she had been going about her daily routine before her death. On the table, unopened packages of baby items had been delivered just days prior. One of the most concerning finds was a broken necklace near where she was discovered, raising questions about what really happened in her last moments. According to Sandra's family, she wore this necklace all the time, even while sleeping or showering. This discovery casts doubt on the idea that she ended her life. If she never willingly removed the necklace, how did it end up broken at the scene? Adding to their worries was the strange situation with Sandra's phone. She routinely used it throughout the day and seldom turned it off. However, records revealed that her phone shut down a full day before her death and never turned back on. This behavior was inconsistent with what her family knew, leading them to suspect outside involvement. Determined to find the truth, Sandra's family insisted on a more thorough investigation. As new information emerged, especially regarding her troubled relationship with Matthew Farwell, authorities had to reconsider their initial conclusions. His behavior in the days leading up to Sandra's death raised alarms, particularly his insistence on accessing her apartment and his odd conduct during his last visit. These inconsistencies prompted investigators to probe deeper into what really happened in Sandra's home. The last known activities of Sandra occurred on the evening of February 1, 2021. Surveillance footage showed her arriving home from work around 5 p.m. Soon after, she briefly stepped outside to pick up a package of baby clothes she had ordered. The cameras later recorded her outside once more, brushing snow off her car. She re-entered her apartment at exactly 5:46 p.m., which was the last time she was seen alive. That night, Matthew appeared on the building's security cameras. Around 9 p.m., he was seen entering the lobby and heading to Sandra's floor. He remained in her apartment for about 30 minutes. His heavy winter clothing and face mask suggested he was prepared for the cold, but his intent to conceal his identity was notable. The next day, Sandra did not show up for work and did not respond to messages, which raised concern. Federal investigators quickly took an interest in her case and began a comprehensive review. Their main focus was the initial crime scene assessment, which they deemed inadequate and which missed vital details. They quickly found evidence disproving the theory that Sandra had harmed herself. She had been excitedly preparing for her baby's arrival, ordering supplies, planning a baby shower, and scheduling maternity photos. These actions demonstrated that she was looking forward to her future, not preparing to end her life. Further suspicions grew when forensic experts examined the injuries on Sandra's body, as the marks were inconsistent with typical self-harm patterns. Investigators also analyzed Matthew's phone records and found deleted messages that revealed a troubling history of manipulation and coercion. They discovered that Sandra had been pregnant with Matthew's child, which significantly altered the direction of the investigation. At the time of her death, she was 3 months pregnant, a fact that intensified their already troubled relationship. Matthew not only denied any responsibility for the child but also reacted with aggression, applying both psychological and physical pressure on Sandra. Her pregnancy became a source of escalating conflict. Initially, Matthew tried to distance himself from her and avoided discussions about the baby. However, as he began to understand the implications of the situation, he re-established contact. His sudden change in behavior, from avoidance to outreach, raised further concerns for investigators. After Sandra's death, they discovered an important detail: Matthew was married with children. Although Sandra was aware of his marital status, she found out in late 2020 that his wife was expecting their third child. This news was devastating for Sandra, prompting her to confide in a friend about her emotional turmoil. She even considered informing Matthew's wife about their affair but ultimately decided against it. When Sandra informed Matthew of her pregnancy, he responded with hostility. He questioned whether he was the father and made it clear he wanted nothing to do with the baby. As tensions rose, Matthew's behavior became increasingly erratic, leaving Sandra feeling anxious and overwhelmed by the pressure and threats she faced. She shared her worries with friends. Investigators found concerning patterns in their communications. Matthew frequently monitored her movements, exhibited extreme jealousy, and sent threatening messages. Matthew's manipulative behavior extended beyond Sandra and possibly affected others as well. What began as a case involving one young woman revealed a broader pattern of misconduct within the Police Explorers program, where Matthew had been a mentor. A review of the program's records uncovered multiple instances of inappropriate relationships between instructors and participants. Sandra had joined the program at age 13, and her involvement with Matthew began when she was only 15, an ethical violation that, compounded by their significant age difference, crossed serious legal lines. However, Sandra's case was not an isolated incident. A larger investigation into the Police Explorers program unveiled decades of unchecked misconduct. Established in the 1970s, the program had operated with little oversight, allowing mentors to misuse their authority without facing consequences. Investigators discovered that other officers, including Matthew's brother William Farwell and their superior Robert Devine, were also involved in misconduct. They uncovered over 200 cases of inappropriate behavior that had gone unreported or improperly investigated over the years. Additionally, they found that in January 2021, an officer had received an anonymous tip about possible misconduct involving Matthew. Instead of reporting it, the officer privately warned Matthew, enabling him to cover up his actions. Shortly after, Matthew began deleting messages and took steps to regain Sandra's trust, which investigators believed was an attempt to prevent her from coming forward. The exact incident inside Sandra's apartment that night remains unclear, but forensic evidence suggests a likely timeline. Tensions may have risen when Sandra mentioned her pregnancy, possibly seeking Matthew's acknowledgement or support, which could have serious implications for him if revealed. A broken necklace found near her body indicated a struggle, and investigators theorized that Matthew may have used force against her. Her phone, which was turned off shortly after Matthew arrived, might have held critical evidence about that night. These findings shifted the case from suspected self-harm to potential homicide. Sandra's death led to Matthew Farwell's arrest in 2024 and revealed systemic failures within local law enforcement. The Police Explorers program was permanently closed, but the consequences of years of unaddressed misconduct continued to impact many lives. This case sparked widespread calls for reform, prompting authorities to reconsider how they monitor mentorship programs involving minors. The investigation into Sandra's death reached a significant point in August 2024 when Matthew was arrested and charged. Prosecutors provided compelling evidence linking him to the incident that occurred that night. This evidence included text messages that showed years of manipulation and control, security footage that captured him at Sandra's apartment shortly before she was last seen alive, and forensic analysis indicating that her injuries were not self-inflicted. The charges against Matthew also included several counts related to his inappropriate relationship with Sandra when she was underage. Records indicated that he had used his position in the Police Explorers program to groom and manipulate her from a young age. These revelations undermined his claims of innocence, which he maintained even after his arrest. However, holding other suspects accountable proved to be challenging. Investigators had connected Matthew's brother, William Farwell, and their superior, Robert Devine, to misconduct within the program, but they were never formally charged. Many believe that law enforcement is reluctant to confront more serious problems in the system, which has led to a lack of further prosecutions. As of early 2025, Matthew Farwell's trial was still in progress. Prosecutors contended that Sandra had been forcibly restrained and that her death had been staged. Forensic experts testified that key signs, such as specific eye hemorrhages and facial swelling, were absent, supporting the theory that she had been subdued before her body was placed in the closet. If convicted, Matthew could face the harshest penalties, including a potential death sentence. Sandra Birchmore's case became more than just a tragic incident, it highlighted systemic failures in law enforcement oversight. Her family, along with activists and advocates, continued to seek justice, determined to ensure her story remained heard and that her case would lead to meaningful reform.
On Valentine's Day in Tijuana, Elizabeth was excited about a second date with a man she had recently met. As usual, she let her family know where she was going, even shared her location for safety. Initially, everything seemed fine. However, her messages suddenly stopped. Her phone went quiet, and her car was missing. By the next morning, her family began searching everywhere for her, hoping to find any clue. What they uncovered shattered their hearts and revealed a more disturbing situation in the city. Elizabeth was not alone. Her case was just the start of a troubling pattern. Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa was born in 1996 in Tijuana, Baja California, a city on the border between Mexico and the United States. She was the youngest of 7 siblings. People who knew her described Elizabeth as a cheerful and gentle young woman who had a strong bond with her mother. Her mother was more than just a mother to her. She was her anchor, confidant, and main source of strength, By early 2022, Elizabeth accomplished something her family had never achieved before. She graduated with a degree in international trade and business from a private university. This was a significant milestone, but it didn't satisfy her ambitions. She aspired to pursue a master's degree to create more opportunities for herself and her family. While planning her educational journey, Elizabeth also managed a small clothing business. To boost her income, she worked as a dancer in a bar located in Zona Norte, a popular nightlife area for both tourists and locals. Like many women in her situation, Elizabeth was careful. She kept her family updated, especially when meeting clients. She shared her location, maintained communication, and trusted her instincts. This cautious habit would later play a crucial role in the effort to track her last movements. On February 14, 2022, Valentine's Day, Elizabeth seemed excited. She had lunch with her mother that afternoon, which turned out to be their last meal together. Later that evening, she had a second date with a man she had recently met at work. He was American. Elizabeth confided in her brother, expressing that while she was uncertain about him, her curiosity led her to give him another chance. Staying true to her usual habits, she promised to keep in touch, send updates, and share her location. Some reports indicate they met again at a bar, while others suggest she picked him up near a border crossing in her white SUV. They went to a Brazilian restaurant for dinner and then drove to a motel close to the beaches of Tijuana. Elizabeth informed her family that she would be gone for no more than 4 hours. At the start of the night, everything appeared normal. She kept sending her location, and her messages reassured her family about her safety. They knew where she was and who she was with. However, then the updates suddenly stopped. There were no more messages, no answered calls, and no signs that she was moving. This silence was not just worrisome, it was overwhelming. Her family's anxiety grew rapidly. The lack of communication was completely out of character for someone as careful and responsible as Elizabeth. It quickly became a clear sign that something was seriously wrong. As the hours went by, the feeling of dread intensified, marking the onset of a nightmare that no one was ready to face. When hours went by without any news of Elizabeth, her family didn't hesitate to take action. That same night, filled with fear and uncertainty, they started searching for her on their own. Their first stop was the bar where she worked, but the response they received was shocking. Elizabeth had not come in that day. Her concerned co-workers provided the family with an important lead, a detailed description of the man she was supposed to meet. They described him as overweight, with light brown skin and visible acne scars. He was a frequent customer at the bar, and although he didn't have a name, the description was detailed enough to help the family in their search. By February 15th, the family was increasingly worried due to the lack of news about Elizabeth. They decided to report her disappearance to local authorities, but encountered a common hurdle: bureaucracy. They were informed that they had to wait 24 hours before they could file an official report. Determined not to delay, they took to social media, creating pages, sharing photos, and soliciting the public's help. Despite their efforts, it felt as though Elizabeth and her white Jeep Liberty had completely disappeared. On February 16th, authorities officially expanded the report to include her missing vehicle. GPS tracking of Elizabeth's phone showed her movements, first to a Brazilian restaurant near the river, then to a motel, and finally to a park. The last recorded location was a downtown hotel in Tijuana. Her brother hurried there, but hotel staff denied him entry, and there was still no sign of Elizabeth or her Jeep. On Thursday, February 17th, her family used the vehicle's GPS history to track it to a street in Zona Norte. A sense of dread settled over them. Something was definitely wrong. Elizabeth's mother and brother drove directly to the location. Although the Jeep was there, Elizabeth was not. They called the police, and officers and firefighters arrived within minutes to secure the area. Their attention quickly turned to the trunk of the vehicle. What they discovered confirmed the worst fears of Elizabeth's family. Her lifeless body was inside, naked and curled up in a fetal position, exhibiting clear signs of violence. The heartbreaking scene devastated her family, leaving them in shock and disbelief. Elizabeth's family spoke out about her murder, the silence and inaction that preceded it. They highlighted a system that failed to respond when she went missing and the long wait for justice. The story quickly gained attention and sparked outrage throughout the city. Friends, co-workers, even strangers gathered at the scene. Elizabeth's body was taken to the forensic medical service for a complete autopsy. The findings were troubling. She had multiple blunt force injuries on her face, chest, and abdomen. A deep mark on her neck indicated an attempted strangulation. Additionally, there were signs of asphyxiation due to blockage of both her mouth and nose. Forensic experts determined that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. The investigation did not provide any information on possible abuse assault. Nonetheless, the case is officially categorized as a femicide, and an investigation is underway to find her murderer. The tragedy continued for the family after Elizabeth's passing. Just 3 days later, her mother suffered a sudden heart attack and died. Although the official cause was cardiac failure, many believed it was due to overwhelming grief that her body could not bear. As the family laid both mother and daughter to rest, the investigation picked up speed. Local and state authorities began to connect Elizabeth's case with others in the area. A frightening realization surfaced. This was not an isolated incident. The method of killing shared unsettling similarities with 2 other cases of young women who also worked in nightlife scene in Zona Norte. Karen, a 28-year-old mother from Veracruz, went missing on August 30th, 2021 after meeting a man at a motel. 3 days later, her body was discovered in a local garbage dump, showing obvious signs of violence. Karen had recently started working as a dancer and escort. She was careful about her safety, only meeting clients through direct phone calls. Before she left that day, she informed both a friend and a relative about her plans. Despite their quick efforts to find her, the situation ended in tragedy. Security cameras recorded the vehicle used by the man she met, and a friend later identified him from the video. However, surprisingly, no arrest warrant was issued, and the man remained at large. Angela Carolina Acosta Flores was only 20 years old when she was found dead in a hotel room on January 24, 2022, near the bar where Elizabeth worked. Like Elizabeth and Karen, Angela had gone to meet a man described as American and possibly of Hispanic descent. Her phone was missing from the crime scene, and when investigators traced it, they found it had been taken to Riverside, California, across the border. This discovery alarmed the investigators. 3 women had been brutally murdered, all linked by time, location, and method. Each case involved a mysterious man, likely American, and all 3 women were associated with the nightlife in the same area. They were killed within a 6-month period, leading to a troubling conclusion. There may be a serial killer targeting vulnerable women in Zona Norte. On Wednesday, November 16, 2022, the Baja California State Prosecutor held a highly anticipated press conference. With a room full of reporters and the nation watching, he confirmed a troubling presence. A serial killer was active in Tijuana. The prosecutor revealed that the suspect specifically targeted exotic dancers and escort who belonged to one of the city's most at-risk groups. His method was alarming. He would travel from the United States into Mexico, commit his crimes, and then escape back across the border, making it difficult for authorities to catch him. At that time, no additional details were shared to avoid compromising the investigation or alerting the suspect. Meanwhile, the manhunt for the killer was intensifying. Nearly a month later, on December 13th, the prosecutor held a second press conference. This time, the news was shocking. They had identified a suspect, an American citizen, whose psychological profile resembled that of Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial killers from the 1970s. However, there was a complication. The man had already left Mexico. Although a local arrest warrant was issued, it wasn't sufficient. Authorities sought a red notice from Interpol to enhance international cooperation. The FBI and U.S. Sun consulates joined the search, and the suspect's physical description was made public to help locate him. Experts also conducted new forensic tests to ensure that no accomplices were missed. The breakthrough in the investigation came from detailed profiling. Investigators identified the man's methods. He targeted young women who were petite, attractive, and vulnerable. He portrayed himself as polite, respectful, and generous to gain their trust and lower their defenses. Once he had their confidence, He would lure them to secluded areas where he would then attack them. Each of the three known victims, Elizabeth Martinez, Karen, and Angela Carolina Acosta Flores, suffered extreme violence, with visible injuries primarily to their faces and chests. His method of asphyxiation was a defining characteristic. Two of the victims were found without clothes, while the third, although still dressed, had more injuries, indicating she may have fought back. This was not a crime of passion. It was deliberate, predatory, and systematic. Although these three cases gained media attention, they were not isolated. At the time of Elizabeth's disappearance, there were already rumors about other missing women with similar ages, professions, and unfortunate outcomes. Their stories have quietly faded away without resolution. As the investigation progressed, authorities were under pressure to act quickly. Although the suspect's identity remained confidential, local media labeled him as the Ted Bundy of Tijuana. His actual name was Bryant Rivera, a U.S. citizen with several known addresses in Southern California. Authorities searched these locations, but he was nowhere to be found. Family members described Bryant as working in e-commerce. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's family was actively seeking justice for her. On February 14, 2023, marking 1 year since her murder, they revisited the site where her body was discovered and placed a floral tribute in the shape of a heart. Her brother spoke to reporters, expressing his deep sorrow and anger. A year had passed, and Bryant remained at large. The family's lawyer had been denied access to the case details, and the prosecutor's office had not provided any updates. Additionally, Elizabeth's Jeep Liberty, which was part of the crime scene, had yet to be returned. On July 6, 2023, Bryant was arrested in Los Angeles. The arrest took place calmly at his parents' home. However, he was only charged with the murder of Angela Carolina, while the murders of Karen and Elizabeth were not included in the U.S. charges, even though Mexico had made an active extradition request for all three cases. The Baja California prosecutor publicly confirmed Bryant's arrest, stating it was a result of collaboration between local and federal law enforcement agencies in the U.S. Bryant was assigned a public defender and requested bail. The judge denied the bail request, citing concerns about Bryant being a flight risk and a potential danger to women. He was ordered to remain in custody at Los Angeles County Jail. His family firmly rejected all allegations against him. His mother claimed he could never commit such acts of violence, and his sister even wrote a letter to support his character. However, the evidence suggested otherwise. On June 29, 2023, a federal judge in Los Angeles approved Mexico's request to extradite him. Family members of Angela were present at the hearing, along with the brother of Elizabeth. The courtroom was heavy with the sorrow of three grieving families. The judge emphasized that Bryant would remain in custody. As of June 2025, the extradition process is still ongoing. Legal experts estimate it could take up to 2 years to complete. If convicted of all three murders, Bryant could potentially face a total of 180 years in prison. However, due to Mexican law, the maximum sentence he could actually serve is 50 years. In addition, Mexican prosecutors have suggested that Bryant might be connected to a fourth victim, prompting them to investigate unsolved cases of missing women. Investigators are also re-examining surveillance footage from hotels and motels to determine if this predator has been active for a longer period than initially suspected. The situation surrounding Elizabeth has evolved from a personal tragedy to a representation of a larger national issue. Her death, along with the deaths of Karen and Angela, underscores the serious stigma and disregard that women in the escort industry encounter. When Elizabeth went missing, authorities did not intervene. Instead, it was her family who located her. It was her online activity, rather than official procedures, that ultimately pointed to her killer. Even now, despite an arrest, justice has not been achieved. The murder of Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa is a heartbreaking reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by women in Tijuana's nightlife and the devastating consequences of a system that too often fails them. Her vibrant spirit, her dreams of a brighter future, and her deep bond with her family were cruelly extinguished, leaving a void that echoes through her community. The cases of Elizabeth, Karen, and Angela reveal a chilling pattern of violence that demands urgent action As Bryant Rivera's extradition process drags on, Elizabeth's family and countless others continue their relentless pursuit of justice, refusing to let her story fade into silence. This tragedy is not just a personal loss, but a rallying cry to confront the stigma, neglect, and impunity that perpetuate such crimes.